I brought it tonight. So
Oh, great.
it's going along. We're getting some.
How many do you need?
Need about 1,600,
Okay.
and we're up to about 800
Okay.
in a week. And we got another month to go, but we probably need to get through with that.
Sure.
Because some of them will get kicked out.
Yeah, and
some
then
of
you
them-
need more than you need. Oh, sure. You're a commissioner, right?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. That's fantastic. I'm trying to think, who's on Mike Lake's on there with you?
Yeah, Mike
My-
and Maryland.
My son, is great friends with Rob. so
Oh, okay.
He go with him, so. yeah.
And I have 2 girls in the school district, Brinley and Brooklyn.
Oh,
Are in
awesome.
the school, they're both Chinese.
Fantastic.
I'll keep that up.
They go to Cedar?
Cedar High and Cedar Middle.
Oh,
Yeah,
awesome.
Brooklyn's the middle one, and Brinley's a senior, and Brooklyn will be 9th grade next year.
Oh, terrific. So you moved up, you're almost out of middle school, elementary, you're out of middle, or elementary school.
We did 3 boys, now we're doing
Yeah.
2 girls.
2 girls. Fun.
Old people.
That's awesome.
That is the,
I remember that last day of school for my.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Picking her up
Good.
for the last
You don't know
time,
whether
like,
they
I
can or-
wasn't prepared for that to be an emotional experience, but it's like, I'm never going to elementary school. I know, I go back.
girls went to South.
Good.
That's
Yeah,
really
you
good.
tried to work today, so
Yeah, it's a wonderful school.
kind of lingered on, and just hard to kick. But the rest of us stayed clear, and we were okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
awesome.
so none of the rest of us got it. Which my kids were really glad. They were nervous they were going to be quarantined, and then
Freshmen
one of
and
the
seventh
others of us get it, and then quarantined again, so.
We were in
Yeah,
Nebraska
so, yeah,
7
we
years.
made it through there all back.
Originally from Farmington,
Yeah,
Northern
so
Utah.
I'm glad to be back here.
Families are all kind of
Yeah.
Provo, Davis County,
A lot better
Kennedy.
in person
When we
than
got
that.
It is, it really is, it's hard,
So
yeah.
came up with it, and
This is a meeting that's hard to
It
have.
is, it's a wonderful
Yeah,
place.
it's good to be
Love
here in
it.
It's
person.
like a fizzle lab, so.
Do you really? Oh, that's
I've
awesome.
been here 40 years.
I really, wow. Well, no, we're working on it. We made it to 9, so we've got another 30 to go, I guess, but that'll be good. So, well, I'm glad you could make it
Thank
tonight,
you.
so. Yeah, you bet. Yeah, we don't have, are you just gonna meet people? We don't have public comments since we're just doing a
No,
study session. You
I just wanted to come and watch for a bit.
Great. That's fantastic. It's my first, like, on the job, so.
Yeah, you're the president.
I'm the president now, yeah, so I've got some learning to do.
We're all learning that.
Right, we've got a lot of new people, so I understand you're friends with Dave, right?
Dave,
Staley.
yes, yeah.
I know him pretty
Dave,
well,
yeah.
so, good. That's great. Well, good, I'm glad you're doing good. Monica, do you need help with anything?
Nope, I'm good.
You're
I
awesome.
put those papers on there.
Yes, thank you.
Spot right there, so.
Here we go. Good. You've got a lot on tonight, so.
What's that?
I said you've got a lot on the agenda tonight, so.
I feel like I'm a little light tonight.
Do you really?
Compared to what I have
I was
had,
worried.
yes.
I
feel
sent you a
pretty good
message
about it.
last week about maybe doing a thing on board books, and then I saw the thing, and I was like, oh, we'll take it out later.
Monica and I have looked into some of that.
How are you guys?
Some more.
Good. Yeah.
We can talk about it down the road. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, we'll have it ready.
Fantastic. Hey, how are you guys? Play, right?
Good memory.
Oh, well, it's been about 3 weeks. Waiting on it to get signed. Is this your wife?
You know Melissa?
Melissa.
Yeah.
Just
Nice to meet you.
practice.
Yeah,
Okay.
it should be good.
Right, exactly, yes, oh, yeah. And you're looking at everything because there, is that what I understand? You guys don't look old enough.
She doesn't, that's for sure.
It's the plan. Oh, that's awesome. Well, congratulations. Thank you. So, and I don't know, did you talk to Carl at all about bringing a question to the board or?
I think I'm okay.
Oh, good.
Sure. I'm in teaching.
Oh, are you?
And so it makes it.
Then it literally.
Something like that. Thanks for remembering.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. Hey, Dale, well, since it's a study session, figured we'd be able to see each other.
How are you, Mr. Breaker?
How'd you come out with your COVID?
I didn't get it. Amy, you made it through. She's back her off. Food. What's that? Good, thank you. Yeah, it's good.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, how are you?
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
How you doing? Come on, glad you're here.
All right.
Yeah, do good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so much of that.
How are you?
You know Melissa? Well, she would do, she's our, she's up to your image. I agree, we all need to do that.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you? Looking sharp, you don't look like you would have ever left the classroom. Good, how are you?
How are you, Gal?
How you doing?
Good.
Good. Fine, how are you? I'm fine. Good.
Normally they have
I mean, good evening.
We got you over here, Dave. How you doing?
How are you, Dave?
Good, how are you? Good.
This one mine?
That one's yours. That's what the sign says.
Yeah. Read my name.
Hey, Shannon.
That's only part of
It's on my desk, but I don't know where it is. Keep going.
Hi, Dave.
How you doing?
Jeff's here someplace.
He just stepped out for a second.
Fine.
Thank you for coming tonight. We put you top of
Ben, it's good to see you here in person.
Yes, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, how's your wife doing?
She's back to school today and started to feel better.
She didn't have too much trouble then, or?
It was rougher than she thought it would be. Going into it, she thought she'd be, pretty good, and then it hit pretty hard, so. Good. So, but she made it through.
This is just coffee.
You like probably, but she's probably glad to be on the.
I've
had it side, huh?
Yeah, she is.
Like him too. That's good. We got paper copies, that means I don't have to keep my computer open that much. I've got them all in there and went through them all. That's good.
Yeah.
I gotta get a smaller laptop, well, this thing is my design computer, which is way too expensive to have here, but I don't have a little, I don't like to fuck right around, I have a lot of stuff. I need a piano for some fiddling music or something. We have one, don't we?
We have a piano, I can do that. I want to do that as a job. Roll.
Try with these. Monica, are we good to go on the live stream?
We are.
Fabulous. Thank you. I guess we might as well get started. It's 5:29 3/4, so we're all set and ready. Welcome to the study session of the new Iron County School Board. We're excited to have all of you with us today and to get down to business. We are going to begin our study session tonight with a prayer from Steve. Please go ahead.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity we have to be together this evening. We're grateful for the opportunity we have to serve the children of our county. We express gratitude for those that work so hard on behalf of our children. We're grateful for our teachers and support personnel and all those that make our schools function the way they should function. Thank you for the many blessings that we enjoy. We're grateful for our country. We're grateful for the freedoms we are able to have. We ask you to please bless us with thy spirit as we meet this evening, that we might be able to discuss those things that are pertinent to our district, that we might be able to develop pathways for our children to be successful. Thank you for thy guidance and direction, that we might be able to do those things that be in accordance to thy will. We ask in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Steve. We're going to begin tonight with President Brennan Wood from Southwest Tech, and let's pull up a chair and have you join us here. Do we have a microphone? We can.
Michelle. Michelle, you're muffling pretty bad.
You know what?
We're good at sharing.
I'm gonna wear my mask.
Pledge.
What? Oh, you know what? We've been doing the pledge just for regular meeting,
Okay, great.
so we don't have it scheduled today. Sorry, I thought you were saying you couldn't hear me. So, I can speak more directly into the microphone though. So, but you bet, we will for sure be pledge at the regular meeting. So, all right. With that, this is our first get together here. So, thank you for being with us while we work through all of the hiccups.
Well, I'm really glad to be here. I won't be long. I just wanted to come here today and talk a little bit about what Southwest Tech is doing, but also thank Michelle publicly as well for her years of service as a school board member that represented the school district at Southwest Tech. And she was an amazing member for us. And one of you have that opportunity as well, and it definitely is an opportunity. And so whoever is appointed to that, I'm here to ask any questions for this group as well in regards to the Southwest Tech Board of Trustees. There are 13 Board of Trustees, 4 of them represent the school districts in our 4-county region, and then 7 members represent business and industry. We meet 5 to 6 times a year, and maybe more based off of the combining of the 2 systems. So all of you know that USHE and the tech colleges combined under one system. And that board, because there's a lot more responsibility in 16 institutions, they've put a lot more responsibility on the local board. And it's asking of them to do more and to be more involved. So for whoever takes that appointment, I just wanted to express my gratitude that we need your support and we need your knowledge, and we hope and want you to be involved and ask questions. And really push us to do better. And I know that's what you're here to do for the school district, but as that appointment, we want you to wear that same hat at Southwest Tech. The great news is that we have a great relationship with the school district and with Southern Utah University. Dual enrollment is really, I would say, the star of the state. There are other groups that say they have some form of dual enrollment, but it doesn't come close to what's happening between the tech college and the university. Just recently, we signed an MOU where we are sharing resources on Title IX. We have trained individuals that are now helping with some of their Title IX inquiries, and we'll do the same thing if and when we have one. We also we're not large enough to have a diversity center, so they have a center that's about diversity and students of color and minorities can go and get trainings, meet together, socialize, and it's a voice that they have at the university and at the tech college. Our students are now able to take advantage of those resources as well. So we're doing some really neat things at the tech college to share in resources and to create efficiencies. I just wanted to talk quickly about one thing that I think is really exciting moving forward for next year is our reduction of fees for high school students. About 2 years ago, we reduced fees by about 52%, and we spread that across the board for all students. So right now, students for $20 can take as many courses as they would like during a semester. And they can take 1, they can take 2, they can take 3, as many as they want. It's already tuition free for high school students. But that $20 fee is sometimes, and a lot of times, a barrier. And we've talked a lot about intergenerational poverty, but there is a huge need here in Iron County and the other 3 areas that we serve. And we worked with the Iron County Commission, and I noticed Commissioner Cousins is here with us today. We worked with them through the Intergenerational Poverty Initiative to get some funds from the county to cover all fees for high school students moving forward. So there's no $20 fee at all. There were sometimes a student would come to us and say, they would say, I can't pay $20, and we'd say, well, fill out the scholarship form if we have funds, we want to work with you. And sometimes it was the books. Books range from $50 to a couple $100. And with that $50,000 from the county, we're going to cover all the fees, all the books, all the materials, and the end-of-year testing fee for a couple of our different programs. And that's been a big barrier, and there is now no barrier for students to take a class at Southwest Tech moving forward. So, Paul, thank you for that support. We really appreciate it. And then just 2 things I want to talk about. A lot of our courses we're changing to open entry, open exit. Sometimes you'll hear us refer to it as OEOE. And we're doing that in automotive, I'll get it right, and industrial maintenance and automation. What that means is in the past, high school students had to take a specific period, and those are some really popular courses. Now they can take classes, so for automotive, they can take it in their 1st, 2nd, 4th, or 5th period, A day for Cedar and B day for Canyon View. And they can start at any time, and depending on how hard they want to work, they can progress through the coursework quicker because it's open entry, open exit. So they can go as fast as they can, and we want them to get as deep into an adult certificate as they can as a high school student because it is tuition free. And for industrial maintenance and automation, 1st, 2nd, and 4th period, again, A day for Cedar, B for Canyon, and we're reserving the 5th period for high school robotics, which is really exciting as well. So with us changing that format, it allows a student, if they do have a couple open periods and they want to work 2 periods in a row on automotive, they can. We've already done that with computer science, and we've seen a lot of success because of that. Those were the highlights I wanted to give. I could probably spend 2 hours talking to you about the things that we're doing over at the Tech College, but I know that you have a lot on your agenda. So any questions that you have for me, I would love to answer those.
Brennan, I got a question.
Yes.
Do you have any students at Southwest Tech from Pearland?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
This came up during the week. I talked to somebody, and does the district, maybe somebody here knows, provide transportation for the students from Canyon View?
From Canyon View? Yes, we have a bus schedule from Canyon View.
But there is no transportation from Pearland.
That's correct.
But there are Pearland students. Do you know how many?
I can get you that number. I don't know off the top of my head, but they drive themselves. And we would have more if we could get them bused, because there's lack of transportation. If they don't have transportation, they're not going to make it.
Can any of that $50,000 be used towards transportation if necessary?
I don't think so, because that's to cover fees, and the need to cover fees is way more than $50,000. We're making up for that with some of our own internal efficiencies. We would like to figure out a way to bus students, and I know I talked to Rex Schiff about that. There's some one-time money on the table from the legislature. I would love to see if we could find some one-time money for a bus or for transportation. If that's something that we own or you own, that's up in the air. But I think it would be nice to work out a way to get Maryland students to the Tech College. Absolutely.
That's something that needs to be looked into, I think.
Yeah.
Collaborative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then another question, maybe when you get those figured back of how many students come, and if we can get transportation, I guess that might, whether it's a bus or the Suburban or a van or whatever we have, if that's something that's possible
Yeah.
for Parowan students. My second question is, and this, I'm sure this guy's maybe volunteer, does Neil Smith play a role at Southwest Tech? I mean, I talked to him, I think he does, but I don't know if it's official. I guess an official role,
He's an
whatever.
independent contractor that helps us with some of our fundraising.
Okay. And does he help at all in getting other people involved or not?
That's outside of his scope, but he's amazing at just wanting to be involved. Once he sees what's happening at the tech college, he likes to talk about it and get involved. But our contract with him is for fundraising. But he always likes to talk about what's happening at the tech college. He's also involved with intergenerational poverty and a couple other committees, not necessarily wearing the hat of Southwest Tech, but there's so many connections that he helps us with, and so that's important moving forward, absolutely.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions too. With regards to transportation, of course, we'd be looking at how many people are coming and the economics of it and the kind of schedules they have, whether they're coming at all different times of day, so we'd certainly be looking at that. But also, I need to just come down and visit you guys a little more. I've been through there before, just on a business tour, but the self-guided or the open entry, open exit concept there, I'm assuming in a lot of those programs, the instruction is such that, because they're not coming into a class and learning the same thing the whole class. It must be a much more individualized plan, I guess, that allows them to move at their own pace. The hours they come in and all of that. So that'll be interesting to kind of learn how you're doing that and how that works out with them being self-guided like that. So maybe I didn't have a question. Maybe I just had two comments. You were waiting for my question.
Well, we want you to come by because we've been doing that as a tech college for some time in our adult programs.
Yeah.
With high school, it's been more of a lockstep type of a course.
Yeah.
So this is new to us for high school, but across the state, there's 8 technical colleges. Davis Tech has been doing open entry, open exit for a number of years with their high school students. Our vice president of instruction came from Davis, and what it allows them to do is to move at their own pace. And a lot of times, if you're working on it, like for automotive, it works very well because you can be working on your own project. And there's obviously some coursework, but there's not a lot of sit down and sit in the classroom. A lot of it's in the lab, so that plays well to an open entry type of curriculum.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Just one quick question I had, and I appreciate Jeff bringing up the transportation issue for Parowan. I think that's a big issue. But you talked about Canyon View and Cedar with the A day and the B day. Does Parowan have their schedule integrated to where it works with Southwest
Typically
Tech?
with a Parowan student, when we create a cohort of, let's say it's a cohort cap of 20, we typically, if it's not an A day, B day scenario, it might be 8 spots for Cedar, 8 for Canyon, and then maybe a couple for homeschool, and then a couple for Parowan. And then we allow them an opportunity to fill those spots, and then if at a certain date those aren't full, we open those up just to whoever has a waiting list.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
Any other questions for him? I think, just really quick, other than, it sounds like we've got some real interest in helping out with and seeing what we can do to collaborate with transportation. Is there anything else as far as the district that we can look at collaborating on?
Maybe just one other thing. So we meet with the principals. In the past, we've had every teacher out to the college. We provide breakfast to our culinary department. We haven't been able to do that this past year. But with that type of communication, we hear things and we try to respond accordingly to that. And I'll just give one example. We were meeting with the counselors and they said, your nursing assistant program is really popular. It always fills up. So this last year, we went from 2 cohorts to 4, and we filled those up. And so we want to listen to the counselors and the faculty and teachers and respond to that. And if there's a demand, we want to fill that and make sure that those students can get the skill set that they need. But nursing assistant was a perfect example. Phlebotomy is another big one. Phlebotomy we can't grow because the clinical space is the bottleneck, not Southwest Tech. We can only have 8 clinical students at a time. But we want to expand and get as many students over as we can.
There's about 8 to 10 students coming over from Parowan High.
Okay,
this semester.
okay. Thank you. I think we could get more, and a lot of times, and Dave, you mentioned this kind of the economies of scale, that the numbers doesn't make financial sense. There's some things that we do that don't make any financial sense. Would you get a van that is more appropriate for that type of transportation? And I tell the legislature this constantly, I get red in the face. We're one of the smallest in size of population, but the largest in geographical region. And so a lot of our numbers financially don't always pencil out. We just want to try to do the right thing for the student. And if we can make it work, let's make it work. Perfect. All right.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. Okay, next on the agenda, we have traditionally had board training as a regular part of our study session, and one of the roles of the president is to see that new board members are oriented. We had the opportunity last week to participate in a virtual convention with the Utah School Board Association. So I wanted to just start by inviting you to share anything that kind of jumped out at you as we watched those sessions. And then we'll just do a brief review of the board handbook, which basically, we have resources, and it's hard to know what in 15 minutes you can cover, that, to communicate hours and hours of training for new board members. And so we're going to try and just focus really briefly on what that handbook teaches us about roles and responsibilities. And then we'll just talk about the Master Board Awards program, which is another really important training opportunity. So let's go ahead and start off. Jeff, why don't we start down there with you? What stood out to you at the training last week?
Well, the second session on Saturday, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but I think he'd been a superintendent for 15 years in Alpine or whatever district that was. Mm-hmm. And this has been brought up before, but I like the situation of he brought up a neighbor or something that had a problem, and just the protocol you go through to get that solved. If it was a teacher, go to the teacher, and if it has to go to the principal, and it has to go to the secondary head or elementary head or whatever, right up the line. And you solve the problem at another level to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway.
Thanks, Ben. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that, what stood out to me was similar, the role of the school board versus the role of the administrators and the teachers, and if there's challenges with the teachers, are they being addressed with the teachers versus coming to school board and trying to address that challenge here. And so, really understanding what the roles and responsibilities are. Are we as a school board doing things that the administrators should do? And then are we expecting administrators to do policy things that the school board should be doing?
Dave, what are your thoughts?
I think just making sure we have clear expectations, and I know that's really nerve-wracking when you get a new board coming in and you may not, we haven't had a chance to really develop those yet, and so I think that's just a really important part of this, is that the administration, everybody from there throughout the district structure understands as the board refines and looks at some of the current things in place and refines those expectations according to what we believe the citizens are kind of looking for, and also some of the ideas that we bring to the table. There's always going to be new things. Everything's somewhat subjective when you've got human beings working together. So I would just say be patient as we go through these first probably 5 or 6 months. I'd imagine it'll take to kind of get those things in place, and while we are looking at a lot of things, we have a lot of things that we want to be working on. The expectations do need to be hammered down, and so that you guys understand too. And so I think that's probably what I came away from, and that's just something I've had on my mind a lot anyway. Realizing that sometimes the discomfort of those around you when you're coming into this. So.
Thank you. Dale, what are your thoughts?
No, it's pretty much old hat. I enjoyed Linda Hanks, and I thought Mike Land Gardner's Every Day Strong was a pretty good presentation, but just good information, reminder suggestion to do things a little better, so.
Awesome. That's one of the things I always appreciate about the trainings is I come back a little re-energized. I particularly noticed, they showed the pyramid that had, like a lot of times we think of board work as students and then employees and then, the district and then the school board on top, and then they took that and they said that's not the right model. They flipped it upside down and said that, the school board kind of pushes from the bottom and then you've got all these people on top. And to me, that was a little bit confusing, but I appreciate the thought behind it because as Ben and Jeff both kind of mentioned, our job is not to manage the district, that's the expert's job. Our job is as the governance team to kind of show where we want to go, and then they do the how we're going to get there. And but anyway, that visual was kind of helpful for me to go, okay, we're not at the apex here. I've always liked to think of it in terms of a bridge. We're the link between the community and the district, and so we have this dual responsibility to reflect as Dave was saying, to reflect the expectations or the wishes, the desires of the community to the district, and then in turn to reflect the needs of the district and what the experts understand and know back to the community. And so we've got this two orientations that we need to be facing there. The other thing that really struck with me, that keynote with Kalani Sataki, where he said, over-communicate. When there's a lack of communication, negativity fills the void. And so that's something that really stuck out to me. So I asked Monica, can we put, maybe all of you, do all of you have your handbooks with you? I asked her to maybe be prepared to put it on the big screen, and that would be great, then everyone could see. The handbook is available on the district website, but I just wanted to do a really brief kind of review of this. The handbook is, if you read through your coming to order book from USBA, it talks about a district policy handbook or the board policy handbook. And that's it's kind of confusing because this is not actually policy, this is just a reflection of the practices, the norms and protocols. This is where the board has been and what we've been doing. It's something we can adjust, so we can look at it annually. In fact, it's in here that we're going to look at this annually and revise it to reflect the character of the board. But we have it so that you don't all have to read all of this. You can kind of get the nuts and bolts of it right here. So let's look at page 2, purpose of the school board. And while she pulls that up, I'm just going to read these really briefly. We are not going to read the whole handbook, but I think we need to read this because if we understand our purpose, we're going to be able to do good work. So the first one's what I just said there. The school board balances the needs of the school with the desires of the community. The school board positively influences student achievement by facilitating conditions for learning to occur. The school board serves as trustee over district resources. The board ensures that taxpayer dollars and district resources are managed appropriately. The school board advocates for public schools and the welfare of the students. Any thoughts on that? Anything you want to add? Anything you want to question? Anything that really strikes you as super important? Okay, awesome. So based on that, I would love to just get a sense of, be thinking about this. We don't have to figure this out tonight, but in that meeting that we watched with Superintendent Crenshaw and the two USBA representatives, they talked about the fact that a lot of boards have goals. And when we talk about, like later tonight, we're going to talk about board priorities. But goals, we're just talking an overarching, like a vision, like what are we here for? And if you go to I spent a lot of time on other district websites recently, just kind of looking and getting ideas. If there's one thing that we can all just put together as common ground, because I know we're not all going to have the same ideas about everything, but if we can find one thing that we're all kind of here for, I think that's going to help give us an idea of where we want to go. And so, like I said, we don't have to figure that out tonight, but if you can think of some ideas or some things that are really meaningful to you that relate to this purpose, like is putting student achievement first, what we're here for, is building trust with the community and building trust with the district, what we're here for, or is supporting teachers, what we're here for. So I would love to kind of make that a part of an ongoing conversation in our training, if you would just be thinking about that. Just really quickly, responsibilities is the next page. There is a full page of list of board member responsibilities. Do any of you have any questions about that? I will just point out to The one that starts with encourage, right at the bottom there, this is exactly what Jeff was talking about. Encourage patrons to resolve concerns through the district established process, working all the way to the superintendent if necessary. So using our policies, and usually if we can resolve concerns at the lowest level possible, we're going to be more successful, we're going to be better at building trust, both with our community and with our district, and it's going to be, it keeps us out of the weeds, which is really great. Any questions on those responsibilities? There's a whole long list. It's mostly showing up to meetings prepared, and then let's go to the code of conduct on page 6. And again, for those of you who may be watching, or those of you in the room, this is available on the district website. So just a couple things to point out that really jumped out at me on the code of conduct is the need to make data-informed decisions based upon my independent judgment after a full discussion of the board. And so using the research and the data to make decisions is really important. Understanding down just a little bit further, understand that individual board members have no legal authority except when convening as a full board, right here in this room in a public meeting. We're not doing public meeting training tonight, but we need to do public meeting training. But this is where we have authority. And then strive for a positive working relationship with the superintendent by respecting the superintendent's authority to advise the board, implement policy, and manage the day-to-day operations of the district. So again, that recognition of we're governance and they are management. So the last thing that I just want to hit here, number 7 on page 7, demonstrate respect for other board members and district personnel by avoiding surprises at meetings. Communicate questions and concerns in advance so everyone can be prepared. So those are just things, I pointed those out because those are the things that have come up most frequently in the books and in the trainings and everything. These are the things that people who have experience just say over and over and over again. So any thoughts or questions on that or on the handbook in general? Anything you found particularly helpful? Okay. Hopefully that gave you a quick resource to kind of get us kicked off and started. I'm just going to pass out, this was something that I saved from a training, the very first one that I went to. It's from the Oklahoma School Board Association, but it's just suggested answers to tough questions. And these are situations that all board members encounter at some point in time. And these are answers that just reflect the things that we just talked about. Just the first one, if you have a situation where you face a complaint by a parent or guardian of a student, the first thing you can say is, have you spoken with the teacher or the principal or the superintendent about this matter? So again, reflecting what Jeff was talking about. So I thought it was a little bit useful, and I thought if I give you one thing, maybe that's directly applicable. Okay, last bit of the training. Any questions on any of that so far? Thoughts, ideas? Okay. Did all of you receive this? It was in your, I don't remember when they passed them out. This is the Master Board Award Program. It's put together by the Utah School Boards Association.
It came in the mailer.
That's what it was. It came in the mailer. Thank you, Dale. So this is just a program that helps you get trained. Every year we are required to do public and open meeting law training that you can do online, or we can do it here in board meeting, whatever your preference is. And then we also are required annually to do training on school and community councils. So this is something, it's a little awkward to get on the first time, but you can email USBA and they will, if the whole password thing isn't working, and they can help you get on. Every year, at the end of the year, they recognize, you might notice they, at USBA, they recognize the boards that have the majority of the board received their Master Board Award for the year. We have always had it till this last year. I did it. Everyone else was, I think Stephen did it, even though he was leaving, but obviously, motivation was a little low since people were leaving, but I would love for us to be able to get the Master Board Award and have the majority of the board engage in that training. Any questions on that?
So that's just a matter of going online and...
Yep, and if you go to USBA, and if you have any questions, I can get you in touch.
I got that too.
Perfect. Perfect, that would be great. Okay, that is all I have for training today. But I do have a question. How would you like to handle training in the future? In the past, the board has kind of passed it around. We can use the coming to order book and just do a chapter each time. We have also used this one, the key work of school boards from, I don't know if you have this one yet, but we can get you this one.
I don't know
You don't have that one? Okay, this is one put out by NSBA. And it's a little different. This is very specific to meetings and running meetings. This is more general, kind of as a board, setting a vision and kind of the work of the board. This might be a good one for us to, oh, sorry. Can we get this for everyone?
So you have it, Michelle.
I might even have two. I can give someone one of mine, because I know they're not cheap, so.
But that's okay.
I've got two. I can get one.
So you'll need.
I have one, Superintendent.
You have one? Ben?
I don't.
So just Ben and Dave? Okay. We can get back to you, and so what I propose is that we kind of just take a chapter for the next few months. Would you like to take a turn doing the trainings, or do you want me to just do it and then kind of facilitate it? Do you have a preference?
Of course we have a preference, that means you do it.
I'm just saying I'm willing, Dale, that's all.
Good, I think my turn.
I think if you want to kind of facilitate it, and maybe the week ahead, the month ahead, tell us which one you're going to do, and then we can study through it too. And get
Perfect.
insights on what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
Awesome, let's do it. Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and move forward then. So the next item on the agenda is a discussion of meeting policy. And we kind of started this conversation at our swearing in, where we looked at our meeting times. We have not had a meeting policy, and I went ahead and had to make a copy. This is a sample of a potential meeting policy. It's one we looked at a year and a half ago. This is not necessarily my suggestion. This is just simply a starting point for us. And I did email this to you. I hope you've had a chance to look at it, along with some other potential meeting policies that other boards have used. There are some things that we would obviously need to change. Any thoughts so far on what you would like to see? As far as, I guess what we're really boiling it down to is, right now we're set up to have a study session on the third Tuesday, and then a regular meeting, business meeting on the fourth Tuesday. Right now, we've decided to do those at 5:30. My thinking is that the study session is the opportunity for us to engage with the district and the experts and learn and hear the needs and the issues there, and to keep that focused here. And then the business meeting is the opportunity to really, and both obviously are open meetings, we want them open to the public, but to have public comment at every regular meeting, we can put that towards the beginning so people can recognize people's time there. But to keep the study session more focused on who's at this table here. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, one thought that I had, I like that because I like being able to interact and to see, get the information from the school district. A lot of times that's when we're hearing it for the first time, we're really seeing the data, we're starting to go through that. And so I think that's great. I think there may be times when it's very important that it's a topic that's of great importance to our public. And to utilize public hearings so that it almost affords the public the same courtesy.
Absolutely.
To say, hey, we've dedicated the time to the district and going through and talking in our work meeting and going through that. Now let's dedicate some time to the public and say, this is maybe it's a special meeting outside of our typical meeting schedule, or it's a block of time during our meeting schedule that we set aside to that. And I think that's the most effective way. Then if we open directly up to the public and we're hearing these things for the first time, we get a lot of knee-jerk reactions. And I think it's good for us to be able to evaluate, to get educated on the topic, to let the public digest a little bit, get educated. And if it is truly items that are of large concern, let's really evaluate this, utilizing the public hearings as a time to be able to have that input and really dedicate the same courtesy that we're giving towards the district to our public.
I love that. Other thoughts?
Michelle, I appreciate what Ben said here. If the public has the opportunity to comment in this work meeting, I would like to call it a work meeting as David suggested earlier. If they have the opportunity to comment, of course we don't act on anything in that meeting, we do that on the fourth Tuesday, but that gives us also to mull over not just what's been said here with all of us, but also comments of what the public has had to say about it before we take any action on the fourth Tuesday. So I would suggest also the public should have opportunity to comment in this meeting also on specific items.
I know you and I talked on the phone a little bit about this too. I think that I agree that we need to have the work that we're doing, coordinating between us, be the main focus of the meeting. I do think sometimes there might be a subject that somebody in the public would like to have addressed, and if we wait until the action meeting for those to even be brought up, then that's going to push us at least out another month before we can really do anything on that, because we wouldn't have an opportunity really to act on something that we're just told that night. It does take more thought, I think, than that in most cases. So I would favor having at least a public comment section that we maybe even utilize some time limits on how long a person would have to address their concern, if it's 3 minutes or something, kind of like you are in some of these guidelines here, to bring it up to see if it's something that we want to investigate through that coming week that we could act upon if it's kind of a time pressing need or something like that, or if we can come back to that meeting a week later so it doesn't seem quite so long that the board is being responsive to a request or a concern that a citizen might have. I don't think we should consume the whole meeting with it. I think that we need to be respectful of the administrators as well in their time. But I do I've really appreciated the city's format in that they do allow a section for public comment at the beginning of all their meetings, the work meeting and the action meeting. And they're fairly loose with that. They actually have been really good to let people speak. But they do have an orderly protocol with the podium, and people line up, and as they come, then you as the president, if we were to do that, would kind of keep that moving along so that we're not just taking an exorbitant amount of time, but maybe we would have at least a scheduled amount of time. Whether we took that all or not might not matter. But I do think, especially if these agendas have gone out to the public, which I'd like to see the public really take the time to look at the agendas before they even come to a meeting, so they know what we're going to be talking about. Don't just show up just to show up. It's great, we'd like to have you here, but be aware of what is on that agenda, because oftentimes, and this is where I guess I'll argue for a little public comment at the beginning of a work meeting, this is the place that we're going to be discussing in a lot more detail the things that we're going to act on the following week. If the public has some concerns about one of the agenda items or more, I think in this meeting it would be really important for them to bring those to the floor so that we have a week to think about what they said as well, concerns, perspectives that they bring to the table, because we are obviously not the smartest people in the room here. I don't mean that facetiously. That could go wrong. I'm not the smartest person in the room here, and I don't think any of us necessarily are. We have a good base of people around us in the public who can also offer those things. So my 3 minutes is probably up, but I would say it would be much harder to act upon concerns of a citizen in the action meeting on a subject that we already discussed in a work meeting that we're ready to move on, and then all of a sudden we have a surprise. We have a concern come up that, like we talked here, not having surprises in meetings. I think we really do need that little bit extra time to consider what they have to say. So I personally would like to see us have a public comment section in these meetings and then move on with our other business.
So just a quick question then. I guess two questions. Number one, will public comment be our only way of getting feedback from the public? Or could we potentially look at facilitating, hey, you can get feedback to us through the website, you can get feedback to us through email? Because there are a lot of different ways when people hear things that they can definitely, we don't want to limit the public that can communicate with us to just those who come to the meetings, because obviously we can't have the whole community at our meeting. And I guess then my other question would be, I guess I question the wisdom of starting off our meeting with comments from before anyone's had any information. We get fed opinions before any of us, community or us or anyone's been able to hear. And so in that regard, I guess if we were going to have public comment, it would make more sense to have it at the end of the meeting when everyone's had a chance to listen. But then we look at holding people hostage till then. And so I don't know, there's a couple of questions.
So Michelle,
I think that's a great point.
Michelle, the way we deal with that is have public comments, but comments or do not address anything on the agenda. So people can come and talk about whatever, but we won't entertain public comments on an agenda item. We'll hold those comments to discussion of the agenda item. Then we expect people to have some open space to talk from the floor on specific
Then
items.
you had a comment, I think.
Yeah, one thing I really like, I'm from Parowan. A lot of the people that I communicate with are from Parowan, and it is a challenge to run over here to a meeting. And so being able to afford an avenue to have them be able to make public comments, and that they don't feel like that the only avenue is, to be able to come down here. We've got girls' basketball games over there tonight, things like that are going on that involve a lot of parents. And so they may watch, which I think is fantastic, that they can go back through and can watch the meetings and have a concern. And it would be nice if they could kick that concern along and realize that it will be addressed. And so I like that. I also agree because, as the discussions take place and, we're hearing additional information from the school district that may answer some of those questions that the public has. And rather than go through that process at the first of the meeting, if it is an agenda-related item, give them the opportunity, either at the end or through some type of avenue or both, to be able to address those concerns.
Yeah, I like that idea too. I think the contributions have been really good on this subject. A bit of open space to bring up a concern that then the board can take into consideration for a whole week would be awesome. But I actually really like both suggestions. I think, and yours too. Like if we have a medium of email or something, and I believe we can set that up pretty easy if it isn't already up. That those could be submitted by anybody through the week or after the meeting is over. Even the only problem with that is that it's got to get out to the board, and so hopefully we could get that communication going. But I think even per topic of discussion, I know that me and you and I talked about this on the phone one day about being able to. We're the representatives, and we do have a trust of our constituents to fulfill, and so. But at the same time, sometimes in real time, some ideas will come to someone while we're discussing details of an issue that we're discussing, and it might not hurt, just like Dale suggested, that we say, these are the things we're thinking about. We wouldn't necessarily have to call on the public, but if the public did raise a hand and say, hey, I really would like to say something about that, because I feel like sometimes that it might feel a little shut out from the ability to do that. Or we may just say, anybody else have a comment, and a succinct, short comment on this subject. I think we should try to start from the more open end and see how it goes. And if it just seems out of control, and it really takes a lot of time to get through meetings, then maybe we reassess it. But I like the suggestions that have all been made. And I think the public really appreciates being heard on some of these things. So I think we ought to look at those a multiple point kind of discussion there.
But it's the president's prerogative to control the tenor of the meeting. We surely don't want somebody to come and read Ted Kaczynski's manifesto.
No.
But
and then the other thing
come
is,
and express a concern or an idea or a question, whatever. that ought to happen, but it hadn't ought to be on an agenda item. Those questions ought to come as part of the conversation on that particular agenda item.
And also, I noticed the city, when they do this, the mayor is really good about, if somebody starts to even make a comment at the beginning of the meeting on an agenda item, she'll just ask them not to make that comment then, but to wait till that agenda item
Hold
comes
that
up.
to the agenda.
Yeah.
So let me see if I'm understanding where we're at here. I think we're all on the same page that we want to build trust with the community and make sure they know that they can be heard. That's really important. We agree that a good way to do that is to have a separate public hearing when we have a big issue, so that we can give them our full attention. We agree that we need this study time to focus on our administrators and to hear from our experts. We have a little bit of different opinions on the best way to handle that in work meeting, but I think we're all on the same page with dedicating some time in our regular meeting for public comment. And I think what I'm hearing, if I can kind of sum it all up, if we were to start, I'm still not, I don't know about start, but if we were to do a little bit of time, well, yeah, what Dale said. If we can put a little bit of time at the beginning of our study session to say, we can take a few minutes of public comment here, but not on items on the agenda, that can get us ahead of the game a little bit of looking at things that may, be of interest down the road. That also gives us the opportunity, after we've had our study session and engaged with our administrators, we can make sure that people are aware of these other vehicles. They can call us, they can stay after the meeting and talk to us, they can email us, they can stop us in the grocery store, and we can have those important conversations in that way too. And then again, at our regular meeting, we'll have a little bit of time at the beginning that people, if they feel the need to be here in person, they can do that. Does this sound like a decent summation?
I've also heard here that some time should be allotted for the public to comment on an agenda item when we're on that agenda item. Maybe I misunderstood that.
That's what that's what Dale mentioned, I think, and I agree with that. I think at least there be a willingness that if somebody really does want to say something, at least we can let them take a few minutes. And if it's something that is going to be a lengthier discussion, then we can move that to another meeting or afterward or something. But at least there be an opening that things say, hey, I've really got a concern with this. Because again, I don't think we as a board should be waiting until after the meeting's over and then somebody wants to come talk to us about something we discussed. Because then to convene again as a board right before we're going to vote, and there is a real consideration we should have taken into account. I just don't think that I like that rushed information exchange at the time when we're going to be taking an action. So I do very much favor being at least open to begin with if there's a comment on a subject that we're on an agenda item, I think we should at least be open to that. And again, you would be responsible to keep the meeting moving along and try to keep those comments succinct. We kind of train the people that are here, in a way as to, we're not going to take badgering, we're not going to take personal insults, we're not going to take a lot of those things that are really bad decorum and foul the meeting up, but at least let them speak. I feel strongly about that.
I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that. As Dale mentioned, that is the discretion of the chair.
Yeah.
And I will tell you straight up, as a parent, as a mom, I can tell you that it's easier to put protocols in place and then to occasionally be able to be permissive when the situation is right than to go with, let's try it out, and then to take that away when we have, a situation that's overwhelming. And for my part, I'm more comfortable giving some structured time at the beginning of a meeting, all the time I need after the meeting or later, but I feel like we've been elected to represent. We are the community. We've been elected to represent the community, and it's our job. We were hired, I guess, so to speak, to listen and engage right here. And I am grateful for all the people who come and listen and want to talk to me later, but they don't represent everybody. They represent themselves. And we need to listen to them, but it's our job to sit here and get this information and make these decisions. And so I think for the sake, I feel like when we have, like in our first, great example is our first little meeting, the swearing in, we were able to, someone said, hey, can we look at, and it was a short meeting, it was a short agenda, there weren't too many people there, And I said, okay, we can take 5 minutes and do this. And we took 4 comments. It was great. We got some good feedback. But I would rather have the expectation be that, hey, we understand that we can come. We are welcome to these meetings. We can come. We've got a few minutes at the beginning of the study session. We've got some time at the beginning of the regular session. And then we can communicate all of these other ways and keep that little bit of structure in place, because I think that the opposite, our desire is to make people feel welcome. But if we're like, I'm sorry, I can take a comment from you, but now I can't take a comment from you, then we end up with people feeling upset and unhappy. And I think I would rather go, let's have a little structure, and then if there are times when we can be a little bit more free with that, we'll go with it. But that's how I feel about it. And I will say, literally every one of these books says that's how it should be. So since I'm new at this, that would be my preference. Any thoughts on that?
You know, I like what you're saying, because if it is a topic that maybe we'll have some public input, you know, directly related to that, we may have somebody who's watching or, you know, wanting to, and we end up with a lot of conversations back and forth or disagreements even between our community that's there. If it becomes a topic that's like that, that's really needs a lot of community input, let's dedicate the time to talk to our community about it. Open a public hearing, go through that process to really, you know, to evaluate that. It was really interesting. I appreciate you sending these other policies out there. Thank heavens we're not Twilla, and we say that it's got to be in writing 10 days prior to the meeting before you can have a public comment. And so I think we're still hitting, you know, with the conversation up front, having the public comments on the agenda items at the end. We hear those conversations and those concerns, and then we're able to take that to talk to other community members and to go through and be prepared for that. So I think that hits kind of a middle ground.
Yeah,
That's my hope.
if you don't mind, sorry I talked too much, but you guys shouldn't have hired me here. I'm like a sheep herder. Just keep talking. I think as long as we are still convened when someone does want to say something about an agenda item, I'm not so worried about whether it's right during the discussion, although I would prefer that, but sometime before we stop the meeting, I think that we do need that room to hear that. This little deal here, I read through all these too. This one might be more appropriate for a work meeting request to say something than even using this formal of a piece in the regular meeting. This would kind of let you as a president, I mean, these could be sitting on the table out there, they could pick them up, fill them out, and then one of the staff could pick those up and hand them to you. And you can kind of see what the thoughts are, and we could maybe even address some of those without them even coming up if they had a question or something like that. But I don't know, that might be something to use. I just do think that again, I don't think we should save public comment on an agenda item that we addressed in work meeting, and we don't get to hear from the public directly until we're ready to take action. That's too quick. I'm in favor of slowing down, pulling the reins a little, having time to think. So I'll leave it at that with my thoughts.
I appreciate your thoughts on that. Dale, go ahead.
I can't deal with the fact that we would sit here in a meeting and not recognize someone in the audience with their hand up to pose a question.
Now, I know you have a lot of experience with it. What do you do if you've got 60 people in the meeting, you've got 5 people with your hands up? How do you handle that?
Very carefully.
That's what I want to know.
No. Well, number one, we don't expect people to get up and regurgitate the same thing that's been said 15 times. And that becomes your prerogative to control the conversation. But if I come to council, if I come to commission meeting and I want to say something, you're going to call on me. I'm going to have some time to stand up and say da-da-da-da. So I think it's important that the conversation, not on the public comment, not attempt to get into the agenda item, but if we have comments from the people during the agenda item, as far as I'm concerned, we need to address them. And you can control whether we listen to 15 or 2 or 3 or 5, but 2 or 3 people can pretty well set the tone of the comments and the questions that are in the public. So
Yeah,
I think it's easily handled.
I agree with that. A lot of times if you have 5 hands go up, it's because they all thought the same thing at the same time, and one person can succinctly say that. Then after that person makes a comment, you can say, is it something new, or was that covered in this last comment, to kind of trim that down. Anyway, I guess we'll vote on that next week, how we actually do it, right?
Well, I
give it some
think
thought
what I
this
would
week, or-
recommend, so we're looking at a policy, and I think if we can set a policy in place,
Right.
that will give us some clarity. So what I would recommend then is that perhaps I meet with Monica or whoever, Todd, whoever wants to help with policy here, and we work through the things that we talked about today. And then in our policy section next week, we can bring it for a first reading. Of course, you'll get it ahead of time. And then we can make adjustments or changes as we feel the need to. But I will put what I'm hearing here today, and then we can take a look at it and we'll go from there. So,
Yeah.
does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that work okay?
One final little suggestion is you might, as you write this initial draft, you might put almost a multiple choice of the things within the scope of some of those little sections we talked about, where we could say, yeah, well, we prefer this over this in that section, like in the agenda section or whatever, because we've mentioned 2 or 3 different ways of doing things. So maybe think about that a little bit. It'd probably get us through it a little bit quicker too if we could kind of choose the modules basically that we would like plugged into that, maybe something like
Okay,
that.
I
You
see what you're
I'm
saying. I didn't, but I do now. Yes, I see what you're saying. So we can go.
Just
So
develop
if I'm
some
like,
little
I think
modules.
we wanted
Right.
this, but someone said that, and then
Right.
we can go, hey, we're all gonna go with this one. No, I like that. That sounds
Okay.
great.
Okay.
That sounds great. And I have to say, I'm completely on board, and I think we all are. We want to obviously make the public feel welcome in our meetings. That's 100% why I gotta be honest, I did not want 5:30, especially for the work meeting. I have felt guilty for a week that we have added 6 or 8 hours, or who knows how long, of each month to our administrators, and we haven't adjusted their compensation or anything, and they said they were willing to do it, and I know they're willing to do it, and it's a sacrifice that they have made. I'm happy to make sacrifices for me, but I do feel bad about making sacrifices on their behalf. And so, but the reason I went along with moving them to 5:30 is I've gotten frustrated with how little people know about what happens in the work session and the great information that we hear. We hear such great data. We hear such amazing things about what's going on in our school, and it never gets out there because people don't hear it. And so I think it's worth the sacrifice, and I want people, we all want people to know what's going on in our schools. So all of this is in interest of making our meetings better and more accessible to the public. So we'll work on this and bring it back next week. We'll try and get it to you by Friday. So you can look at it before our meeting next week. Okay, any other questions or thoughts on that?
No, none of us got our compensation raised for doing this at 5:30 either, so we're all in the same boat, I guess.
That is the truth. All right, Dale, you're up next.
Each of you had a copy of the job description of our legal counsel. We're nearing the end of the 4-year, this term started out as a 1-year contract with 3 renewables. So April, Todd, we're at the end of the 4th year, so there's a job description here for you to consider. I'd like to see us get down to a local representative instead of an out-of-town one. I have some other strong comments that I will withhold, but I'd like to suggest you bring these back in a work meeting in February to pass a new job description so it can be advertised, and we get a new legal counsel on board for the 1st of April.
So Dale, just to be clear, there's a timeline. It says proposal calendar on the document I included in your folder. Can we pretty much follow that calendar?
Where are you, Shannon?
So it's on page 4 of the RFP copy from the last time. Just want to make sure we're on the same.
Well, we have to follow policy, whatever her policy is.
I think that's just a calendar that was put on this RFP.
It is. So what I'm asking is, do we follow the same timeline, since we'll need to bring someone aboard based on this timeline, based on when this contract is over?
Okay,
Now,
this
of course,
shows,
the dates are gonna be adjusted.
this shows the end of April, and I was thinking it's the first from Todd, so it's the end of April then?
We had to provide notice as to whether or not we're going
True.
to extend by the first.
But we have time to do that now. And do we need to do anything, well, we can't. We can't do much before work meeting
Once that
next month.
contract expires.
Bring back
then we would consider.
Comments and clarity for that. So that still works. Okay,
So Dale, the contract expires at the end of April.
yes. I was thinking, I thought it was first of April from Jeff or Paul, but
And it looks like when I read this today, the contract, or it goes into effect immediately after it's approved too. So it's not like there'd be a lapse if we got it done by the end of April, so.
Yes, so can I propose the following dates? So RFP released on March 8th, then the question and answer period would close on March 29th. The proposals are due on April 12th. The evaluation of the proposals, April 16th, and then the final decision by the board at their April 27th meeting.
Okay, run those again, Shannon.
Sure. March 8th, the RFP is released.
March 8th,
Uh-huh.
okay,
March 29th, the question and answer period closes.
okay,
April 12th, the proposals are due.
okay,
April 16th is the evaluation of the proposals. And then the final decision is made during the board's April 27th meeting.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
That schedule does allow you to come back to the February meeting with any changes that you want seen in the RFP in regards to the description of services that we require, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's move ahead. Board personnel review process. Shannon?
Okay. The board personnel review process happens, it has happened in Iron County School District at the February board meeting. Well, not at the meeting. The board has taken the full day from 8 a.m. until the board meeting starts to review personnel. We had a discussion, Dale, Michelle, a couple of other board members, myself and our district administrators. At the end of our last one, wondering whether or not this is an appropriate process for the board to have our administrators come and discuss their personnel, where they're at on the evaluation scale, and then any concerns that they might have with personnel. As you probably noted during your training this last week, there were a couple of times when it was mentioned that that's not the board's role to evaluate anyone except for the superintendent and the business administrator. And so to go through an evaluation kind of review process regarding each employee probably is not appropriate, and it's probably time for the board to reconsider that process. It's been going on for at least 20 plus years, and so it's been going on for a long time. But I think it's important that once we learn something, that we take action to perhaps make changes to ensure that the board is engaging in a process that's appropriate. I know I've talked to several superintendents since that training, and none of them go through this kind of process because of the optics of it being an evaluation of personnel. Todd, I don't know if you want to share what you've learned.
Yeah, I discussed this with a few BAs too, and they mentioned that the board oftentimes has to serve as an independent appeals board in regards to potential discipline or other actions performed by an administrator, by a superintendent. You know, there's a process that you go through in regards to that. And so if anything came up during these meetings or these evaluations in relation to a particular situation, the board would have to recuse itself in regards to any appeal as to action that was taken. And we'd have to bring in and hire a whole independent type of a board to come and listen to those appeals at that time. So they highly recommended that we not go through that evaluation process with the board, just to avoid that situation of having to bring in someone else to hear appeals from employees after actions are taken.
So any questions about the former process and what that entailed?
So what we would be hearing if we did do this would be evaluations that you've already done. We'd be
That the
hearing.
school administrators have
Right,
already done.
that's what I'm saying, at every level.
Yes.
And I really, Todd, that's good. I think that's good sound work that you've done, because it's going to come about where you do have somebody come before the board, and if you've already formulated some opinion or anything, that's probably the most compelling reason not to do it. That I mean, it'd be great if we could get to know them a little through the evaluation process, but do we remember all these names and all the details? Either, you know, and then when we're out visiting the school, you know, we go, oh, yeah, I remember talking about you in our little heads, you know.
No, that's a great point, Dave.
So I think those are thoughts well taken personally. I think that's probably wise.
But the downside of that is there are a lot of faculty and staff who are not comfortable to bring a complaint to the administration. And that leaves them without canoe or a paddle. But again, Todd, your point is correct. It gets into a sticky situation if we've heard the project or the complaint and then come back and re-vote on the action. But somewhere in the process, we've got to provide an avenue for people who have a complaint that they don't think they can levy to the administration. So I don't know where we go from that, but
I know it's
there is
also
a problem out in the district, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I've had some of those. In fact, I have it written in one of my board priority points, that very thing. If it's a personal grievance or something like that that somebody brings, then they should go through that process. But if they know that, if they really think that the administrator that's immediately over them, or it's a policy issue or a curriculum issue or something that the board has had something to do with, then we probably need a little bit of a short path to the board there. But we can talk about that. But I do think overall, though, that I think you're absolutely right about it. And I wouldn't have thought of that without some of the thoughts you had on that personally.
We also have a grievance policy
Yeah, we
already in
do, and I've
place.
read that too.
Jeanette is going to review that with us next week, I believe.
Yeah.
So let's keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I would just suggest that the board keep that in mind as we review that policy. And are there any holes? Is there anything that could be tweaked with our current or with the proposed grievance policy? Because I know within that policy, it gives the option that if you're not comfortable taking this to your principal, then take it to the secondary or the elementary administrator. If you're not comfortable with that, or your issue is with one of them, then it goes to the superintendent. And if the issue is with the superintendent, then it can go to the board. And so I think there's a process there that we can review.
I think the reviewing of it will be great. A lot of times it's just communicating to people so they understand the options available to them, because we did all of these policies over the last year and a half. We've reviewed that several times, and there's that whistleblower stipulation in there. And so I think a review of that, and maybe even a discussion about how to educate employees on what their options are. But as far as February, what we've traditionally done, I think we're good with discontinuing that. So, Jeff, Dave, Ben, and we have a
Yeah, I agree. I think it helps delineate really a grievance versus just an evaluation. Evaluation is there's a grievance, has a process to run through. So.
Great. Is that all?
Okay, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So next, and this almost falls in line with board training, but we're going to get a review of the strategic plan, and I invited Superintendent Delaney to do this review with us. It was a really great process that I was able to be involved in, and the board was able to be a part of, and it just will help educate us on the direction the district is headed right now. So go ahead, Shannon.
Thank you, President Members. Appreciate that. All right, I've given you a document that's in your folder. It's called Iron County School District Strategic Plan Guiding Document. And we're going to bring it up here on the screen so that our community can see that as well. Hey, Monica, how do I, oh, it's hot. So while he's bringing that up, I'll describe a little bit of the process and how we got there. It was really evident that we had some awesome things going on in our district, some wonderful initiatives, but it was also evident that it needed to be brought together under our district goals. And so we brought the idea to the board of putting together a strategic plan and who we would include in putting that plan together. And so we put together a community-based strategic plan guiding coalition is what we'll call it. So members of our community were involved, law enforcement was involved, anyone that we could think of who would be a valuable contributor to putting that plan together. And so I'm going to I want to first review who was a part of those committees. So as a district team, we came up with the standards of quality that encompassed the things that we knew we had been working on and had become important based on our conversations with the board, as well as our administrators and they with their faculties. So culture of collaboration was important. Second, social emotional learning. We've been involved in this for a few years and had been leading the state in what we were doing with that initiative, and it was important that we bring those ideas together. And then the third quality was, or is, future ready, and preparing our kids to be ready for the future, because we know that our teachers are teaching students who will be doing things that we have no clue that they're going to be involved in. We're preparing them for occupations that we may not even know about today. And how do we do that? And how do we help them become critical thinkers and problem solvers? And how is that included in what we do within our classrooms? And then finally, community connections. So what you've been talking about today, ensuring that our community is a part of the curriculum, the decisions that are made in regards to what is taught, as well as relaying what we're doing within the school district to our community. I think you all have taken some good steps forward in process that I think will help with this as well. So as a part of those committees, our culture of collaboration, we had Roy that helped us with that as our principal, then our principal at Parowan High School. And then we had a wonderful student from Parowan High School as well. We had a parent and a middle school teacher and our district Title I coordinator. We had a school administrator in Terry Sanders, who was the assistant principal at Cedar High. We had a preschool teacher, and then we had an elementary principal. So critical players in making decisions about collaboration. And you can go through those lists. We don't have to go through every single one. Our social emotional learning team that was chaired by Kevin and one of our school psychologists, Ramona McGarry. And you can see the individuals, again, a parent, student, representative from DCFS, and elementary and high school folks as well. With Future Ready, we had Corey Henwood and Greg Sanders. Greg is our CTE director and in touch with our job community and our workforce, and Corey, who was leading up our digital teaching and learning. And then, of course, parents and students, the same kind of committee makeup. Our community connections, that was led by Steve Burton, and our, at that time, secondary director, Rich Nielsen. And again, you can see the individuals that were, that served on that. We had Representative Ship, who was a valuable member of that committee, as well as, at that time, Fred Rowley, who was our math specialist for elementary, and then our BA, and Michelle Lambert, who was the board member representative assigned to this effort. So those are the standards of quality, and then we came up with an action plan and the steps that we were going to do to get there. And that is what drives what we do. It drives our goals every year. And so when we come to you with proposed goals and collaborate on those goals at the beginning of the school year, They're all based on the strategic plan and the direction. So that was devised 2 years ago. As you know, our year was cut short last year, and that gave us some specific challenges, but I think it also helped us to rise to the occasion when it comes to serving kids and how we serve them with technology and other ways. We now, as you know, we're over 10,000 students, reaching close to 11,000, and about 1,400 of those students are online. And we are reaching kids who previously were not participating in the education process at all in our community, which is an awesome thing. So we're encouraged about that. Have we perfected it? Absolutely not. There is still work to do, and we appreciate the support and the help from the board, as well as direction as we continue forward with our strategic plan. So that's kind of it really fast. I would encourage you to read through the guiding document. It describes the strategic plan in each one of those 4 standards of quality, as well as how we got to the plan and a focus for the district. And as you probably saw, it goes from 2019 through 2024. Do we review it yearly? Yes. If you'll remember back in August, September, when we talked about district goals and where we were headed, this was forefront to the conversation and to our district goals. We've been displaying the strategic plan at our board meetings over the last few months. Hopefully you've noticed that as well. Questions?
Well, not about that, but about membership, about enrollment. We're over 10,000, which normally would require the board be expanded to a 7-member board.
Yep.
Where are we on that process, time-wise, and what needs to happen?
Sure.
Can I ask a question on that too? I know we have some students that are from outside of the district participating, and I think we had the comment from someone that actually counted in that number. Does that really have to be that way, or because it doesn't really represent the ones that are participating from outside the district, doesn't represent the I guess the representative samples of the county. So is there some rules on that?
So any student that we're receiving funding for, the WPU, the weighted pupil unit, count in our enrollment.
Yeah.
So every student, I believe it's, I did a count today, 10,887 students is our current enrollment. Yes, each one of them counts, and it counts toward that decision to move forward. So Dale, to
We're
answer.
already over 10,000 without, my.
Yes,
So
close.
timeline, where are we?
We're close to about 10,000 without them. So, I conferred with legal counsel. They conferred with state code, and the next step is that we take this to the county clerk, and he's made aware. He makes contact with the lieutenant governor, and then redistricting, that process begins.
But the process of redistricting is going to be a can of worms.
Absolutely.
A question.
Sure.
Roy mentioned that we don't have over 10,000 exactly if we don't count the ones from outside. Did I hear that correctly?
I think what were we at?
We're very close.
Yeah, we were just under 10,000
yeah.
without those out of the district.
And the fact is, asking the question, do we need to move forward, even though some of those students do not reside in our district? The answer was yes.
The question, are we by law required
Yes.
to move forward?
Yes, according to state.
We've asked. It's a great question. It's
Uh-huh.
already been asked and answered, I think. So, we've already inquired, and
Yeah.
that was the response that we got, so.
It was from legal counsel.
And that question, when does this have to go into effect if such happens?
So not until the next general election, so not until 2022 is when that would happen. But the process needs to start so that the county has time to do their work and communicate with the lieutenant governor's office and all of that. So legal counsel will make that contact to the county clerk, and then he knows the process of moving forward. And we kind of leave it in their hands until that work is done.
And that moves to a 7-member board.
Yes.
And then there's another ratchet to a 9-member board at such time as
I think it stops at 7.
Yeah, for school districts, I believe it's only 7.
Yeah.
Everything that I've read is only mentioned
So,
7.
yeah, I thought there was 9.
I don't know if there's any 9-member board.
Okay, that's better anyway.
Alpine School District has 7, and they're at 80,000 students, so I would assume that that's where it tops out. So, good question, Dale, and that needs to start now, because as you said, it opens up a can of worms, and there will be a domino effect and actions that need to be taken, so.
Any other questions relating to the strategic plan?
Should, which is probably not going to be the case, I get that, because we're growing. Should that number fall in
I've
the
wondered that
process
too.
between now and 2022, then what?
If it falls, I don't know. I guess that's a question for legal counsel. If we see that number decreasing, then we'll need to make sure we're communicating with the right people.
Well, seems like if it falls, we simply don't move forward.
Yeah,
Ought to be clear enough.
we do have quite a few homeschoolers, and I guess they don't count on that number, do they?
No, they don't, do they?
Only if they're participating in our online program, then we count them.
And they also count if they take, for instance, a choir class and something else, and that's it. They still count, even though maybe they're here for 2 periods during the week.
Is it apportioned, Todd, based on how many classes
Homeschool.
they take?
Yeah,
You're not qualified for WPU.
not unless they are taking courses through our online
Okay.
programs.
simply-
And we do have a lot of homeschool students who are taking classes through the online
And
programs.
that's fine, but otherwise, we don't get WPU.
Correct.
So the only other thing I had on the strategic plan guiding document, just a comment, is that I'm sure our board will be looking at that. We may be looking at adjustments to that. I would imagine that we will as time goes. It seems very, very comprehensive and very complex to me. And, you know, I would really like to see a lot of simplification come back into the district personally, but I would probably be favorable toward the board really looking at that plan and seeing what's there and see if there needs to be some pruning done too. So I think that'll just be a process we'll talk about as a board and see if we want to relook at any of that. We're about midway through, not quite, because you're 2 years in right now, and so we've got a ways to go. And I don't think there's anything that locks us to this other than the fact that it was done and a lot of work went into it. I can certainly see that.
And it was approved by the board at the
Yeah,
time,
it
so
was.
it
So
would
it
be an
would
action.
take, it would take a board action to relook at it and do any changes there too. But yeah, there's a lot in there. I did read through it all. I did a lot of reading. Got some good practice this week. So anyway, yeah, a lot of stuff there. So anyway, that's just a comment.
Read through it myself, thank you, Dave, I appreciate that. And I'm looking at page 9 of this strategic plan. This is looking like a lot like Franklin Roosevelt alphabet soup during the Depression. I wonder if maybe all these acronyms could be spelled out, you know? You only run across about 20 of them, or how many, okay, that's facetious. But anyway, there's a lot of those.
There's actually a book you can buy, the education acronym.
There is.
Like you notice in the back of your handbook, we've got, and we need to update it, but there are 2 pages of acronyms just to help us out. I feel the pain.
Well, one thing about the acronyms that I noticed is I Googled all of them when I didn't know what they meant. And they are not unique to Iron County, so we've obviously brought ideas in from a lot of other places besides our own county. I'm sure that much of the content of this plan is, has been cut and pasted into the document in a lot of ways.
Can I?
And so
No.
anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. This plan is specific to Iron County, and as Michelle can attest, the dialogue was based on research. And do other districts call upon research? Absolutely. So when it comes to collaboration in school leadership teams, building leadership teams, professional learning committees, that's all very common vernacular, not just in our state, but throughout the nation.
Right.
So I can attest that there isn't anything that was cut and pasted into this document. Not one.
Well,
Not
as
one
part of the,
sentence.
as part of the process, I can attest to the fact that I see there things that we wrote. We sat as a, not even as we had education experts on the team, but most of us in our community connections were parents, we're and we had district representatives, but
Thank you for that
it's
clarification.
very much our own
Thank you.
language, so. But yeah, I feel the pain on the acronyms, it takes some
So we will
time.
put together an appendix for this that spells out what those are.
Just put it out the side of each page, would you, so we can remember, so I
We
know
can do
what's
that
going
too, Jeff.
The Dummy's Guide.
You all, by the end of the school year, I promise you're gonna know what most of those acronyms mean.
Can I add all the accounting acronyms to those too?
If you would, please.
All right, thank you Superintendent Delaney. And our next item is, again, we're trying to get up to speed on all of this. So the good news is there's trainings to come on all of this, and so we're gonna dive right in on social emotional learning. Shannon, we've got you on that, but go for it.
So as you noted, that's a part, one of our standards of quality. There is a lot to that, just that title, social emotional learning. We know that kids, research shows, as well as what we've seen, and Jeff, you can probably attest to this, having been a teacher, and you who have been parents, that unless our kids feel safe and secure in their school environment, it's really difficult for them to learn. So attending to those social emotional needs and having processes in place that are part of our district processes have been critical. And I appreciate Kevin and his wonderful team and the hard work that they've engaged in over the last 4 years. He has led the state. We have people looking at what we're doing. I will be on a training with the Salt Lake City Chamber of Commerce next Thursday with Superintendent Dixon from the state office, along with some business folks talking about that and what it means within each one of our entities. So I want to turn some time over to Kevin so that he can give you a very short, we'll have more time in the future, synopsis of where we were 4 or 5 years ago and how we got to where we're at. Thanks, Kevin.
Well, like she said earlier, this is a lot of information. This is a lot of stuff that we've put together and rolled out to help our students. But let me just take you back a little bit, and Jeff can attest to some of this too, is that 19 years ago I was hired as the assistant principal at Cedar High School. And during that time, I had the opportunity to go to DCF staffings and to certain kinds of meetings that occurred to talk about kids, talk about what goes on in their lives, talk about things that are happening. And, you know, the only thing I could come back and tell my teachers is that these students were struggling, that these students were having a hard time. I couldn't share the information that I heard at those staffing meetings because that was private. That was information that couldn't go out. All I could do is say, listen, you know, this student's really having a hard time. As teachers, let's really make sure that we're reaching out to them and helping them understand, you know, that we care about them, that we want them to be there, and that we want them to be successful in their education. And so, and I know that the teachers there did that. They did a great job of welcoming those students into their classrooms and helping them be successful. But as I went through, the next year I was hired as the principal, and I got in a little bit deeper too into some of the things that were going on in our students' lives. And I sat in an interview with one of the law enforcement individuals for a couple of hours where I had a person talk about the things that had gone on in her life and the things that she had to deal with and had to do, I guess, to be able just to survive. One of the comments that she made to us was that, I'm surprised I'm not face down in a gutter somewhere right now because of the things that have gone on in my life and all the things I've had to deal with. And that's really left an impact on me as an administrator. I know that we have children in our schools that need the help that social and emotional education can give them. I know that they're there. One of the statistics says that 1 in 4 of our children are going to have some sort of an exposure to some sort of a traumatic event in their life. Now, 1 out of 4 doesn't really mean a whole lot. When you make that 2,500 out of 10,000, that really speaks to you. The 2,500 of our kids are experiencing traumatic events in their lives that may or may not. Now, I'll say this: we don't see all 2,500 of those kids in our principal's offices and our counseling offices because they have an adult or someone, maybe a teacher, a coach, a friend, or someone that takes part of their life and helps them through some of these difficult situations. But ultimately, what it comes back to is that teachers have a remarkable opportunity to be able to make a difference in students' lives. And I think any teacher, if you talk to any one of them that are in this room today, or any one of them you go into schools, they understand that, and they do a great job in helping those kids be successful. But those numbers are staggering. And so a few years ago, when we started looking at this, we basically started off with looking at behavior in our schools, wanting to make a difference with that. And just to quickly go through this, we went to kind of took a field trip up north to Provo and Newell school districts and looked at their behavior units. After we came back, we thought, this isn't what we want to do. This isn't where we want to go with this. And one of our psychologists was Willow Montgomery, talked to me about, she'd gone to a counseling conference and she'd seen a couple of movies, Paper Tigers and Resilience. And Paper Tigers is kind of a rough movie. It has some language in there, but it really tells a story about what trauma does to kids and how it affects their lives. And Resilience is another one of those movies that kind of has the same effect on you, but it's a little bit more easy to listen to, for me especially. And so we watched those movies and we realized that we needed to take a different approach when it came to dealing with trauma and with students in our schools. And so we went to San Francisco Unified School District and looked at their process and how they were dealing with these kids. And we came away with some great, wonderful experiences. We had some of the principals go with us. We took quite a team with us that kind of experienced that educational, I guess, deliverance and understanding how they were dealing with those same things. And I've got a couple of sayings that I really like to bring up, and they're important for me. And I think one of them is the preventative part of this, is that we want to be the fence at the top of the hill. We don't want to be the ambulance picking up the kids at the bottom of the hill and dealing with them that way. We want to be able to be the preventative ones that are helping take care of their issues and the things that they're going through at the beginning, and not having them be that consequence at the bottom. So that's one of them. Another one of them, too, is that, and this one's kind of a philosophical thing of mine, and you want to show me a student that's misbehaving, and I'll show you a student in trauma. I really believe that 95 to 99% of our kids that misbehave, we have a lot that misbehave, and there's some serious misbehaviors in our schools that we're dealing with. But I really believe that 95, 98% of those behaviors are linked to some sort of a traumatic event that occurred in their life, and so those things are happening. And so we try to keep those in perspective. We've done a lot of great work in our schools, and I'll just go through a couple of those things here. We have what we call, we have 8 therapists that we've hired in our district that work in the majority of our schools. We have full-time social workers in all of our high schools, all of our secondary schools. And right now, I think we're about halfway into our elementary schools with part-time LCSWs or therapists in our elementary schools too, in the bulk of them, at least half of them right now, and working towards putting more in. We have what we call wellness rooms, a non-punitive process for the kids to be able to go and deal with manipulatives. If they're having a struggle, feeling anxious, they can go there and be a part of self-healing, and they can be a part of just kind of sitting it out and getting through it themselves. And we do have someone there that works with them if they can't do it themselves. Groups are being held with our counselors and our social workers, and those groups are gauged off of the needs of our students, whatever that may be. Whatever they're going through in their lives, we try and have a group that's there and available for them to be able to get the help that they need and help, see other students too that are going through those same things. Peer interaction, as you look at schools, is an awesome way to go through situations, to get through situations. And so groups are very, very much used in our district.
Kevin, can I interrupt you one?
Yeah.
Can you just explain the tier structure that you explained to me when we spent our 2 hours together the other day? Just so we know kind of so everybody knows how these different things kind of fit in that.
So we have a 3-tier system, and some schools it's a 4-tier system. I think the one that uses 4 tiers, she's added her own onto it. But what we have is we have a tier 1, which is a curriculum or something that's used in the classroom for all students. Okay, so every student in those classrooms is a part of that, whatever that may look like, if it's zones of regulation or if it's Suite 360, whatever it is that we're using, every student has access to those and every teacher has access to those tools. Tier 2 would be the groups. That's us, and even the wellness room would be a tier 2 intervention as well, that we use to pull us students out to help them get through certain situations. Tier 3 would be our mental health therapy, our therapeutic LCSWs or whatever license that they may carry. They use that Tier 3 to have more interventions in place for those students who need that therapy. And then in some instances, if it's something that we feel like that the school shouldn't deal with, we involve the Southwest Center, and that would be the Tier 4 that we use as well, that they would take those students and use therapy for them as well. So we have that option in all of our schools to do that. Is that what you were?
Yeah, I think it's just instructive, so people can see how that structure fits together.
Yeah. PBIS is really our base, okay? All of our schools are involved in using positive behavior interventions and supports, which is PBIS. And if you go through our schools, and when you do go through our schools, you'll see it being used by all of our teachers, and it's a great thing to see in process because they do a wonderful job within our schools. And that's really our basis for that. We help take care of a lot of our behavior problems just with that PBIS structure. And that deals with a lot of those things that we don't have to get to a different intervention on. We have what we call restorative practices. Jeanette's been involved with incorporating that into our schools. We have what we call mindfulness and yoga too, which we use. Each one of our schools has a trained yoga instructor. Now when they came to me and said they wanted to start yoga in the schools, I thought, wow, this is something out of the box, really out of the box. But as I went out and watched some of these lessons being taught in some of the elementary schools, I was amazed at how the students reacted and some of the feedback they could give to their teachers. Really what it is learning how to relax, before you're taking a test. What can I do with myself to be able to prepare so that anxiety or some of those things don't creep into me not doing well. So they teach them some of those skills in mindfulness and yoga. Let's see. We have, we talked about Suite 360, which is available for all of our teachers in Tier 1 for there's videos, there's lesson plans that can be accessed by all of our teachers, and those are available for all of our schools. We purchased that this last year, and we used it as a soft rollout this year. It's not required to be used. Those tools are there and available for those teachers if they want to access them. And then we talked a little bit about zones of regulation, and this is really specific to our behavior students. And so we teach them, just like anything else we're going to do as educators, we teach math, we teach English. Sometimes we forget that we need to teach behavior too, because guess what? Sometimes that doesn't get taught either. And so we have to teach that as educators as well. And so zones of regulation is our curriculum that we use for teaching behavior. And it's been pretty effective. Let's see. The core competencies of SEL is self-management. We want to teach our kids to be able to manage themselves. It's harder than maybe what we would all think, but being able to teach those kids, if they can feel themselves starting to ramp up, we want to teach them skills to be able to deal with that themselves, to regulate themselves. And that's kind of what zones of regulation does. That's what the wellness room kind of does as well. So it helps them learn and understand what that looks like. Self-awareness, understanding when they're becoming elevated. Responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and then social awareness are the 5 areas that SEL deals with and the things that we want to promote in our schools. So that's a quick synopsis. I could go on for a long time with this, but I know we only have a short amount of time. But that's really kind of what our SEL program is. It really bases down from trauma all the way up to the restorative practices and hopefully making things whole in that classroom. And I know that Roy has used it as a principal of Parowan. I know that Belinda has used it in her school at Cedar Middle School to some wonderful effects. I can tell you this right now. I know that through what we put in place, the processes that we have stopped suicides. I know we have. I know that there's data out there that we've seen in some of from our teachers and counselors that we've actually been successful in stopping kids from committing suicide. And one makes it a successful program. Just stopping one of those makes it a successful program. We want to be able to help our students be successful in school. So, any questions?
I just want to spend a little bit of time on that too, as
You
I
bet.
mentioned to you earlier.
You bet. Thank you, Kevin.
So when any other questions are over.
No, go ahead.
Good? Okay. So I really appreciated Kevin and Jeanette spending 2 hours with me this week ago or something, I guess, because I wanted to learn a little more from your perspective on all of this too. So I appreciate that time. I do have an understanding that we are all genuinely really concerned about the well-being of kids, and I don't question that at all, that our best intents are out there. There's been a lot of challenges in the world, and there have been through all the ages. I think we've experienced a lot of those things, But one of the things that I do have some concern about, well, actually I do have quite a concern about a few things, and I'm just going to throw this out. I don't want to have you feel like we're throwing you overboard on this, but I do want to bring up a couple of things with particularly the SEL, the Suite 360 program. And I know there may be some others that you're using that maybe haven't followed the process that I think maybe should have been followed there too. And I will say this right at the beginning, I don't care if the program came straight from heaven or hell, there is a process that I was a little disappointed that I found that had not been followed with the adoption or integration of the Suite 360. And don't take this as any slap on anybody personally, but I do think that we are getting, I went to a training for the faculty at North Elementary, and it threw up a few red flags to me about the 360 program itself and some of the group work that's being done in the classroom on the Tier 1 level, which I know some people could consider that in the layman's world as almost a group therapy situation. I know yet in the technical spectrum it may not be considered to be that, but in a parent's eyes it seems like that. And so there's been quite a bit of concern come up recently, and quite a bit of research being done by others as well, not just in the administration. Actually from the 360 website, looking at some of the objectives and the philosophy used with that program. I think if anybody's looked on there very deep at all, it is a Gates Foundation program that is being used there, and the content of it as well comes from that foundation, which isn't to just disparage it automatically, but there are some concerns with some of those things. So mainly what I'd like to talk about today is the process of how the Suite 360 was evaluated in the beginning and how it was approved and adopted. The funding, I'll talk about all these just a little bit. I did ask the questions of you guys, and thank you for providing the information back to me, because I want to make sure that we're really clear on this before I mention it here. But what I see as the problem with this, and putting aside the good or the bad, it just seems like there was really a lack of disclosure to the school board and to the citizens of the county, of our county, with what Suite 360 is. I know that you did mention, Jeanette, that you guys had asked for parents to be involved with that evaluation process and had a hard time getting parental involvement there. And so you did put together a team that consisted of a couple of parents, I believe, and then some of you from the district level administration, and then some of the counselors that I believe from almost every school you said you had counselors who were involved in that, which is good. But I asked questions of the board, not everyone, but of some, if they remembered this subject being brought up when you were starting to consider the program, the use of this program, which is it's a software program, basically, as I understand it from what I've gathered, that leads the discussions, provides the narratives, the questions, and the content for the classroom use in the Tier 1 level, and then also kind of guides into some of the Tier 2 stuff as well. And I understand that it is a soft introduction, soft implementation right now. I believe North is the one that I was told anyway, that was kind of the pilot of taking it a little bit further into that process of using it more comprehensively across the board in those different tiers. Anyway, I'm going to go through a couple things that I just jotted down just to make sure I have my information correct here that I put to you here today. And I will tell you this, that the main reason I'm doing this and looking at the process is because I care about you, and I care about us as a board, and I care that we follow a process that is very transparent, very open, very scrutinized by both the citizens and the board. So that, because I think we actually have been put into a kind of a awkward situation when people from citizens come and say, what is this, you know, and what involvement did the board have, and you know, so anyway, this is what I've gathered. The acquisition, the adoption, and the implementation was done without the following. And it was done without the oversight of the school board. Now, there may have been somebody on the board that was involved in it, but the general oversight of the board was not involved in that. The knowledge of the school board, really knowing what was going on through the whole RFP process, the investigative, evaluation process, the school board was not involved much at all in that, apparently. And I believe that's what you guys told me the other day, so that was the way I understood it. And also, even though parents were invited to be part of it, there was no general parental citizen review or vetting process, like in a public hearing type of a situation where we would normally be vetting the curriculum, for instance, because this is a curriculum, which should require those things. Now, I do know that from what you guys wrote back to me, and that's why I wanted that clarity, that it was not required under current board policy, I believe, for you to disclose the RFP, the rubric that was used to analyze and evaluate the results or the responses to the RFP. And so I take you at your word on that too, that that was not a requirement that you do those things. So I'm not trying to put blood on your hands with that by any means, just saying that from my perspective, this was done without these things, whether it was required or not. So the parental citizen review, the vetting process, and also the board review and vetting as a board was just never done. And the board approval was never acquired, other than the funding. The funding came from the CARES Act, I believe, the CARES money, is that correct? I believe that's what you told me.
Gears money.
What's it called again?
The governor's money, it was called Gears money.
Gears, okay, Gears. Okay, so I'm glad you straightened that up, because I was thinking it was some of the money that came through CARES, which was the COVID-related money. It was Gears. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Specific to special education and withdrawing.
That's good. That's actually better. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. The adoption of this Suite 360, it was never adopted by the board either.
So can I interject, and I don't want to
Sure.
cut you off, I'm sure you've got,
No, go
it's
ahead.
okay if you've got more, but I just want to, I am not maybe as well versed as I should be on the curriculum adoption process, but our policy, I guess we need a maybe review of what that is, because my understanding is, I can see your concerns there, but I can say that from my experience, this is no different than any other curriculum. This hasn't been handled in any way different. I don't believe that there was anything secret or any attempt to hide or any kind of, this is just how our curriculum process has been. Now, if there's a need to maybe review how we do that, I think that would be great to review that. I do know that obviously we want to rely on our experts, but maybe we can be looped in a little bit more and be aware and educated on what we are providing oversight for. But just remembering that, as I was trying to find it in there's, I think it was in Coming to Order, it talks about that curriculum process and really as a board, how we're not the experts, we need to rely on the experts. It would be foolish for us to be the ones to pick the curriculum. However, as the representatives of the community, obviously we need to be looped in and understanding what's going on. So I don't know if this is what you're meaning, Dave. It sounded like you're implying like this was handled differently, and I just want to clarify, I don't think this has been handled any differently. I think it's just been part of the normal process of how things are going. Maybe we want to review that process as a board for our involvement. Yes, Shannon?
So, and I appreciate, Dave, your comment that you're looking out for us. And that's what we do as a team. We look out for each other, and we make sure that we're following policy. And so it may be wise at this juncture for all of our education to go through our current policy and review curriculum adoption. And as Michelle said, it wasn't any different than any other curriculum adoption. We adopted, our elementary language arts curriculum not too long ago, and that's up for readoption in the next year, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Burton? So this is a good time for us to review policy. And
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay, now I'll continue on a little bit. I have just a little to finish through here. I appreciate that, and actually if that exposes that situation as the way that we adopt curriculum, the school board, that is one thing I do know about their role, is to adopt curriculum. And I will be really honest, I do get a little bit, I understand that there's professionals, I do. But I also get a little bit annoyed when we constantly get hit with let the professionals worry about it. Because I do think there is a real place for citizen input and board input and complete transparency. Some of the best work that I've seen done is by people who are not steeped in the educational process because they come in with a fresh set of eyes. So I think we need to be a little careful with using that term a lot. And that's not disparaging anyone who is a professional educator. I'm just saying that there is a place for the lay person to have a very important perspective on these. So
I agree 100. I just want to say I agree 100%. That's why we're here. So
Okay.
I absolutely agree with you. Go
Okay.
ahead. Go ahead.
Anyway, what comes to the bottom line is I think that this definitely has put a lot of teachers in a very awkward position. I know personally of teachers who are very really concerned about the use of the 360 program. And it puts the administration in an awkward position, and it puts the board in an awkward position. I'm not legal counsel, but I would think that it opens the door for litigation in circles where there was never a school board who represents the community that actually adopted this. And if that's the way curriculum has been adopted in the past, that's going to be a high order of business to change that for sure. Because I do also know, I like to dive in, not to find fault really, but just to see where we may have some weak spots as well in the way that we do things. I had a good visit with Jeanette last summer, I believe, on curriculum. And she was so good to share things and explain a lot of things to me. And some of the concerns that I had was with the CKLA curriculum, just some of the content of that. And I'm not going to share our whole conversation, Jeanette, but I asked her, I said, well, what do the other school board members think of some of these concerns that I brought up? And she said, well, to be honest, and this isn't to disparage you guys either, but this is just what she told me. She said, you're the first person that has to do with the school board, and I was a candidate at the time, that has come in to talk to me in depth about any of this, which to me is a problem too. I think we need to be way more engaged in the process when we have that responsibility to really, in a lot of ways, to be a guardian at the gate of our of what goes into the classroom, make sure that the values of our community and our culture here are not being not being let down with certain curriculum that comes in, because we know that a lot of curriculum comes from places way far away from Cedar City, Utah, that don't share our values. And so I do have some real concerns with this. I think that with that in mind, that we do need to take a step back and really look at the way we're doing things as far as adoption of anything that goes into the classroom. And we may need to pull back on some of these things that we've adopted that have not gone through this process until we go through that process and really vet it out publicly and as a board and get citizen input. And I would suggest strongly that we have public hearings on some of this as well, on what these things are, so that the public who is also very interested in this, parents who have children in school and such, have a chance to do some of their own research and present that to the board along with what the administrators present as well. So I think it will really help develop trust in the whole district, both on between board members and the staff and administrators. We have to have that transparency and the real understanding of what it is that is being proposed, what the reasons are, what the objectives are, and then also a trust measure between us and the citizens of our county, so that they understand. I'll just give you a couple of little examples, and I'm trying not to take too much more time, but I think we'll need to put this on an agenda item for our next meeting to see what we want to do about this. But my daughter has two children in North Elementary. She didn't ever receive any notification of the SEL or the Sweet 360. However, she did find out from another parent that they had sent it out on the notification app that they have, and she just doesn't do much with apps. So she was unaware of it. There is where I think a lot of parents that have kind of come to the surface with this issue. One of the real problems they have with like the community circle concept in the classroom, where the teachers have the kids, and again, this is still somewhat optional, I guess, from my understanding. It isn't happening everywhere, but it is in some. It can certainly be construed by the citizen as a group therapy being led by a teacher. And there are very specific narratives and questions, even to the point where if the school principal wants to, they can have the teachers administer this in a fashion where the tablets that the kids are using actually have answer buttons on them, or answer things where the kids give answers online, which then stores that data of answers of frankly, some psychological psychology type questions, however deep or shallow they may be. It does keep track of things that are emotional and psychological with that child. So those are some pretty big concerns in my mind of parents not being asked for approval or like you would a sex ed course or something like that, to have their kids participating. It puts the burden on the parent if they even want to access the data that is gathered through those means, which I know the district does use that data for determining whether a child needs to move into Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention. From what I've learned, and I'm not an expert on this, I won't say, but just the things that I've gathered, the data is collected and used for those purposes. And so most parents, I would say 95% of, in fact, I don't know one parent that knew that was going to be part of the curriculum that their child was going to participate in, would be the data gathering. So I do think we have some concerns we need to be more upfront with. I think we need to look at this in our action meeting next week to see how we want to approach it. I think it needs to go through a complete vetting process very, very thoroughly, and any other programs that we have. that have been, approved in the same manner. We need to probably list those out and see kind of what we want to do there. So anyway, that's what I want to say about that today. I really want to have a really good relationship with the district, with the administration. I want to have a good relationship with our community, and I want to see an improvement in the relationship between our citizens and the district too, because I do know that we've been through the mill a little bit with that the last couple of years too. So a lot to do. Anyway, I'll leave you with that for now. Anybody has any questions for me about that? I don't have the answers maybe, but I've just shared what I've gathered over the last month or so. So,
Michelle?
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Appreciate that.
thank you, Dave, for sharing your thoughts on that. And please, Jeff or Ben or Dale, if you have thoughts or questions, go ahead.
Thank you, Dave. I have a question regarding the North Elementary, which I have not visited, okay? Except to get a copy of their schedules. I guess, Mr. Burton, are you aware of this pilot program of North Elementary and what is happening when this 360 is implemented, or what's taking place in the classroom itself when this is going on?
So I guess as far as the health program is working, is that what you're?
What happens? What happens with the kids? What's happened in the classroom when this is going on?
Well, we're just rolling it out, but, so we're still working through that piece of it, I think, but anyway, it's laid out so that the teacher can work through that curriculum. And the goal of it is for students to build their emotional resilience. My understanding is, for example, how to have good relationships with their fellow students, how to respond to different events. I'm unaware of anything inappropriate in that curriculum. So they may take their students, they may put them on the computer, as I understand it, and have them work through some of those lessons and learn the concepts in those lessons. And it's going to be different depending where they're at, what grade, those kind of things.
So these kids in a circle?
Well, not with this. This is more on
giving
computers.
answers, or?
Yeah, this would be more on the computers. This is a computerized program. So they're on computers for this. Now, if we're looking at...
Computers are asking the questions?
Yes. Isn't that right, Kevin? It's kind of an online program that will guide them through that.
And my understanding is that's why the teachers didn't have to worry about having an LCSW doing this type of work, is because the computer program essentially gives the teacher the script to follow with fidelity, that nice fidelity word we always hear, and to have the questions to ask, or the computer itself or the tablet itself will ask those questions that they can respond to on the tablet, which then records that data on that student.
Well, and Jeanette can probably add to this, but it's not something, this is more of a learning experience for kids to learn skills. It's not necessarily to take the place of an LCSW. It's not therapy. It's really just for them to learn the skills that would just help them be successful in school, with their relationships with their peers, how to behave appropriately. Again, it just supports the system we have in place of helping students to self-regulate their own behavior. Is that?
Yeah.
It's not a screener
No,
or anything like that for
I
those
did copy a
purposes.
bunch of lesson plans if you'd like to look at them. This is just random. I just went through today and printed a bunch of random lesson plans, and you can look at them. There's continue the conversation questions right here. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, these are just, is it on?
Yes.
Just some random questions, and they're all fact-based based on whatever they're learning that day. So there's no questions that are asking emotional type things, at least on the ones I printed and what I've looked at, and I've looked at several. Describe a time when you worked with a team. Were you successful? This one's about teamwork. And then in the quizzes that I went through, and there's several quizzes, what did he do that made it so he didn't listen? I mean, they were really super just fact-based type questions. So I'll pass these around. The other thing that I have, and I've given this to a couple of parents recently, is we did come up with a demo account so that you're welcome to look before we make a decision. I mean, it would be good to be informed for sure. To just watch the videos and look at the quizzes, and I am not aware, and this is something that I wanted to have a chance, and I haven't yet with our holiday yesterday, to talk and see how North is rolling out. They're not really a pilot, they just kind of took it and ran with it. And every school just kind of, we gave them the option to be able to do it kind of how whatever worked for them. And so if they're using circles to do this, that's their prerogative. It doesn't say anywhere on here that they need to use circles. They can choose to have the teacher give this lesson and then just ask those questions and kids raise their hand. They could choose to use the computers to do that, but the actual computer doesn't ask these questions. These are guiding guides that the teacher can do more than what the computer gives them. All the computer does is they have a little reading or a video, and then there's like a little quiz to see how they do. I have yet to run into one, and I could be wrong. I could probably hear that from a teacher maybe that's used it more than I have for sure, that they're typing in any responses about how they feel. It's more just did they listen and kind of understand and just some key points, I guess, type questions. So I would be interested to see if there were any specific things that they were typing in and the data that we were collecting from that, because I didn't know that we were collecting data on kids from this. It was more just like the answers to these questions type thing. Did they do it or not? Did they complete the lesson or not? And teachers have complete choice. They can say, oh, I've got a bullying problem in my class. Look, there's 6 little lessons on bullying. I think this would be a good one. I'm going to watch it. Oh, it's really great. I watched one this morning that brought me to tears about a little girl being bullied. There were some fun things on there. There's a great video on teamwork. I mean, it was just a resource, a huge resource for teachers to have that lesson if they needed it in their classroom. I would hope that they would review it before they watched it. But I would love to walk somebody through it. Just to kind of see where you're worried for sure. And I think we should definitely, as a board, go through it and see if there's anything, there's demo accounts. But I will pass this out if you want to look at them.
That would be great, Jenna. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I'm not trying to put anybody on defense with this discussion today either, because I really do want to make sure that we're approaching things the right
I'm
way.
going to pass
So
the sticky note around. Don't keep it.
They're not all the same, right, Jeanette?
No, they're all different.
So it's kind
If
of
you
almost
want the
stacked.
parent demo, this is the password and everything. I'm just going to kind of pass that around.
Awesome. Ben, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just one thought, Dave, I appreciate kind of the overarching thing is this curriculum and what's our policy to go through that? How do we vet that? And the biggest challenge that we run into, I think, is for a lot of parents, they're busy. They're running from soccer games to baseball games to whatever and doing homework at night, and then all of a sudden it comes and it affects you. So how do we get the information to them? How do we make sure that we're communicating this, that this is open, and maybe it's their neighbors heard about it and talks to them about it, whatever. But what's our process? What's the policy that's there? And I think that becomes the overarching thing that as a school board, we need to focus on making adjustments to. And then, I think it'd be great to get a little bit more educated on this and to understand it. And I appreciate the fact that you do somewhat pilot programs. I hope you're giving teachers the opportunity to input back in as well and to say, hey, this is overwhelming us. This load is challenging. I know when they first rolled out the calming rooms or the whatever they call them, it almost had the appearance of a reward. If you're disrupting class, you go into a room that you're rewarded, or you're calm, or you're away from things, and how effective is that? And so I think a lot of those things, the process you guys go through, as long as you're getting that input, is a big part of that. But for us as a school board to really evaluate how that's presented, how that's brought forward and communicated back with the parents of the community. So,
And if I could just add to that, I think we're more than willing to do what we can to be open, and I think it's just a process of identifying where we can do better and how we can do it, because I think we're all more than willing to be able to do that. So just so you know, at least for me, you have my support in doing that, and it's something we could probably always do better. So we're definitely willing to do that as we press forward, and you know, that's what I would say. Hopefully that we're just, the goal is to press forward, you know, and make improvements where we can, and making sure we're including people in that process.
Thank you. I just want to add, I think we're all on the same page of wanting the best things for kids and the right thing for kids. And so I think what we get from this discussion here is a review of that curriculum process and our understanding of our role as a board in it. And then that communication piece, that transparency piece. I know that the district has really been working. There was this whole curriculum fair idea, and it went online because of, but there's really an effort to try and help the community understand and see. And I know being a parent, like, there's parts of the curriculum that I have an advantage, like I sit down with my kids every day after school. So I have a little bit of an advantage there. I'm up close and personal with the curriculum in a way that I won't be able to in a few years when my kids are grown out of it. But so I hadn't really thought of that before, but this isn't something, my perspective is different from everybody else's for that reason, or at least not everyone. Ben, you have kids in school still.
Yes.
But at any rate, I think maybe a discussion as well about how we can increase that collaboration. That's one reason I love on the strategic plan, that culture of collaboration. I think there's an effort and a desire for that to happen in any way that we can build that trust and reach out and make more connections there. I think will really help resolve concerns before they get started, because then we'll all understand what's happening. So we will look at that going down. All right, let's move on to number 9. Todd, it's your turn. Let's hear from you. This is paid time off during quarantine for part-time employees discussion.
Okay, we're going to totally shift gears here for just a minute.
Awesome. Hang
Change
on though,
directions.
super quick. Along these same lines, the district this school year has started doing Wednesday web forums. It's an opportunity, anyone can grab a link, can hop on at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday in the month. And it just so happens that social emotional learning this was the topic that was picked a month ago or so ago. I know because I was invited to be one of the panelists. But tomorrow at 4 o'clock, there will be a Wednesday web forum on social and emotional learning. We'll have a lot of our people on there. You can ask questions, and people can respond, and it's a great way to help kind of help people understand what's going on. So that's the Wednesday web forum tomorrow. I wanted to remember to put that out there.
And the link will be on our website.
The link is on the website. Thank you. All right, Todd, I apologize. Back to you.
That's
Dramatic shift. I'm ready.
Yeah. So I wanted to discuss this today so that we could potentially have an action item on the agenda for next board meeting. Well, some of you might remember the if you want to go acronyms, here's Government Acts, the FFCRA.
Is this from the Great Depression?
Act. Well, close. Yeah. This summer, they passed the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, which required and provided tax credits for small businesses to continue to pay employees even if they were subject to quarantine or if they came down with the coronavirus or something like that and were unable to work. Employees who normally would not qualify for other benefits. Included in that, governmental entities were required to provide paid leave to part-time employees who didn't qualify for benefits. Well, that act, and so we did that all through the fall, and then those provisions expired as of December 31st. So we're no longer required to provide that paid leave to our part-time individuals who are subject to quarantine or who contract the coronavirus. So what we need to decide, I guess, is we have that option to continue that practice through the remainder of the school year or through the remainder of the pandemic, however long this lasts, or we can basically shut that off. So I wanted to get a feel for the board, and then next board meeting we would need basically an exception to policy in regards to paying those part-time employees if that's what you want to continue to do. I did bring a few statistics. So far this school year we have had 115 requests for this paid time off. That's not 115 individuals, that is requests. Some individuals have been quarantined more than once. we have paid out in gross wages a little over $38,000 to those individuals. If you count the payroll taxes, it'd be around $41,000, a little over $41,000 for this first half of the school year. That's an average of about $335 per request. There are certain, the FFCRA gave very strict guidelines as to when an individual qualified and how many hours they qualified for and that type of thing. If you were going to continue this, I would propose that we continue to follow those guidelines and those rules. Otherwise, it could get extremely out of control, I think, in some cases. But just wanted to put that out there, see if there's any discussion, find out what your thoughts are on that.
So Todd, faculty and staff have not lost anything during quarantine.
Full-time have not.
Then this same benefit should be extended to part-time. They probably need it worse than full-time.
In a lot of cases.
And just having gone through a quarantine, that's why I wasn't at our last meeting, you never plan for those, you don't prepare, they kind of hit you off guard, and I do think it has a big impact on a lot of our part-time employees, and where it's not their choice, it's not, it's just one of those things that happen. I'm in favor of continuing that.
I agree.
We have the funding for it apparently.
Do we have the funding for it? Not exactly. I mean, we may end up dipping into reserves to cover it, unless with some of the new. In fact, I just got notice today, as we started this meeting, that we will be receiving a significant amount of money from the new ESSER 2 funds that were recently approved by Congress and that. So. It's possible that we could use some of that funding for this, and that's probably where we would go. So in that regard, yes, we would have the
But up
funding
through
for
December
it.
we have.
No, we've had
funded
to,
that also.
we've been funding that.
Funded all the way.
Mhm. Yeah, the governmental entities were not allowed the credits that other small businesses were given for that.
Well,
But there is
let's look at it next week.
And there is a possibility of the funding that comes through from
Yes,
this
some of
last round of.
This last round of ESSER money, I believe that would qualify. I'd have to check to be sure, and I'll have that for you next week.
Okay.
Putting it off till next week will give us the time to research.
Well, we can't make any action on this. I just wanted to get the feel from the board. It sounds like it is something that you're in favor of. So I will put together the resolution or the proposed wording for that for next week, as well as some of those details on funding. And we'll have that for you next week.
That would be great. Thank you, Tom.
Okay?
Let's go ahead with the COVID bonus discussion.
I get 3 in a row.
You do.
I'm liking
You're doing
this.
great.
Okay. There's been a lot, maybe not a lot, I don't know. There's been some items in the news recently when the governor proposed his budget. He proposed, and legislature's on board with this, they proposed giving all educators a $1,500 COVID bonus this year, as well as a $1,000 bonus to all school level staff in the school districts throughout the state. That is in the, like I said, the governor's budget, the legislative budget. They had me complete a survey last week that provided FTE counts, so full-time equivalent counts for our classified staff. And as part of that, they gave us certain guidelines as to who would be included in that and who should not be included in that. And so the way I'm understanding that this bonus is going to come to our people here is that it will go to all educators, so anyone who is a certified licensed teacher, right, or administrator, and classified employees, so those are our non-teacher employees, right? That includes all of our custodial staff, our maintenance, our bus drivers, IT, a lot of our district office staff, anyway. So, and classified employees who work in school settings and have contact with students. And so I went through and I did that, and in some BA meetings that I was in also last week, there was discussion about this, and a lot of people brought up, well, what about all of those classified employees who are working extremely hard to make sure that everything is running in the district, but don't have that contact with students or are not working directly in the schools? For example, our IT group, keeping the network up and running so that these online and blended courses can be working, the way that the teachers need them to work. Our payroll people who have had to deal with a lot of different things throughout this. Well, they're not included in the legislature's allocations for these. And so again, I wanted to bring this up for discussion and wondered what your thoughts are on the district from its funds extending that bonus to those who may not qualify for funds from the state. Because the state will send us all the funding that we need to pay the teachers and those who have that direct contact with students.
Can you refresh me on that bonus that was given? This was before we were on the board, but the one that was given, I think, in December. I was thinking
that was to all employees,
it was
including
all
teachers. Yeah, that was everybody.
That was kind of for that same reason of all the trouble they had to deal with, and so I
It
wondered
was.
if we would. I know I'd be unpopular for this, but if we would be double dipping, doing something because somebody else was getting something from a different source of income. I do know it's been tough. It's been a rough thing on everybody. But just wanted to bring that question up. I couldn't remember if it was all employees or if that was the teaching.
No, that was everyone.
Okay,
Yeah, that was
just wanted
everyone
to
on
clarify that question.
Mhm.
And that one that we did in December, that's something the district's been doing for 30 years. It's been a traditional kind of a holiday bonus thing, yeah.
Yeah, I was
Christmas
thinking that it
bonus
was, I thought we talked about, or I thought
Yeah.
you talked about it
We
being a
did.
little because of what it does.
Well, and
Well,
it was because of that, we didn't think we were gonna be able to do it, and then when we got yeah, you're right, then when we got that. But my question is, am I right in thinking that there's a little bit of politics going on and why it's not extended beyond teachers? That is this relevant to Salt Lake County, and like, is there, or is it just, we're just doing teachers?
The politics in Salt Lake County is more related to those students aren't in direct contact with, or those teachers aren't in direct
Right.
contact with students because they're online teachers,
Right.
because Salt Lake doesn't have
I see,
in-person
it's
classes.
flipped. It's similar issue, but it's flipped. It's just that they don't
Yes.
qualify for that
Yeah.
because they're not in, I see.
There, at least from what I understand, there isn't a lot of discussion about including these additional FTEs in this up there, unless you've heard other things.
No discussion, in fact, just the opposite, they're avoiding it. And it's probably important to remember too that this is money that will be coming to our district for these employees.
It will be for the ones that are in contact with the
Yes.
students, but not for the others, right?
Right.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that would come out of our own budget to do that, again, for clarification.
Yeah.
And do we have a number on that? I think that'd be
So-
helpful, a number on that and what the budget implications of a decision would be.
Yeah, so I did a calculation, first of all, with the survey, so those who will be included in that in regards to the classified, because all the teachers get it regardless. There were 416, and they had us calculate it out to 3 decimal places. You don't need to know that. Full-time equivalents included by definition. That means there were 55 left out. Full-time equivalents. That is about 59 people, between 59 and 65 people that would be left out of getting that in the district. And those are people, like I said, the mechanics, the IT, our staff downstairs, the bus garage staff, a lot of those.
And then do you have any dollar
Maintenance.
figures on that?
Yeah, so the way the state's doing it, currently the teachers will get a $1,500 payment. The staff would get $1,000, so they're giving more to teachers than they are the staff. So if we were to go with the staff of $1,000, it would be $55,169 if you include benefits, and we use a 32% calculation for benefits. If they're full-time, with retirement and that, it ends up being about $73,000, $72,823.
There's kind of a double-edged sword here, Todd. Actually, this probably
The
isn't
state's
considered a
fixing to pick
bonus because it's just part of the program. If we want to talk about bonuses, in 2019, you awarded $450,000 at Christmas time for bonuses, and last year you awarded $545,000 in Christmas bonuses, which I did not support. So in the last 2 years, we've done $1 million in Christmas bonuses. This isn't necessarily a bonus to the part-time that's left, or the staff that's left out. It's just part of parity with
Right.
where everyone else is. So I'm not totally on board with the fact that it's a bonus discussion. I think it's either fair or it isn't compared to the faculty and staff.
To everybody else. And that's where I'm at with it too, to leave out, those few people who, I don't want to, lessen any of the work that anyone's done, because everyone has put in extra effort this year to ensure that our kids are safe, that they're in school, that they stay in school. And that the teachers who are teaching have the resources that they need, that the administrators have the resources that they need. I don't know. Parity-wise, it just makes sense to.
Part of the problem with the bonus termination is that I don't believe that one segment of society should prosper at the expense of another segment. We haven't had any terminations in the district. No one's lost their home or their car because of the virus. That's not universal across the rest of the employment. So I think we have to be a little cautious about giving that much money away in the name of bonus. But I don't think this is a bonus. I think it's parity with the rest of the faculty and staff.
Would your feelings, and I'm going to ask you, Shannon, this too, would your feelings be that this $73,000 would even give them an equivalent hourly compensation for the extra time that they have put in? Honestly, I know how this feels, because in business, if we give a raise to somebody, then we start going, oh no, do we need to do this, and so we have that tendency. But kind of what's your perspective on that?
I think you probably know what my answer is.
Yeah, I probably do, but I mean, have they
No,
gone?
I appreciate you asking.
Have they gone over, 10, 20, 30% of what their normal load was, or even more maybe, and maybe 50? I don't know. What's your take on that?
A lot, and it varies depending upon their job role and responsibilities. Belinda, you might be able to speak to that on a personal level, leading a school and what she sees.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think on every level at my building, from administration, lunch personnel, custodians, our special ed aides, teachers, they've all had to put in extra hours, a lot of extra effort and time. And so, like, our special education aides are limited in the number of hours they can work by law.
Right.
And so, but, I know some of the people in my building, and they'll take stuff home even though they're told not to, right? And they're working at home. My teachers have put in way more hours than they ever have. I have veteran teachers in my building that have been teaching over 20 years that have said this year is like being a brand new teacher all over again. That they're spending so many hours in the building, trying to do blended learning, and make curriculum accessible for our students, because we've had such a high number of quarantines. And still, even though the quarantine guidelines have changed for in the building, now I'm seeing it more in the community. So we're still having a high number of students quarantined, and so we have to provide that curriculum access legally. And so that puts my teachers working a lot of extra hours they haven't worked. Administration, we're working a lot of extra hours. Doing contact tracing and all of that goes into that we didn't ever have to do. And so I'm seeing it across the board, but especially in my teachers. So this compensation, well, it's nice from the state. And the teachers will always accept it because I have had teachers whose husbands have lost their jobs, who are on the verge of losing homes, who have lost cars, who have really had impact into their life financially. So this helps, but they put in a lot of effort this year.
So it might even be a matter of the nomenclature a little bit, like Dale says, should you even call it as a bonus? You might just say compensation. Yeah, because I do think it's been tough on probably the education community as much as anyone. Some of us, it's not changed our lives that much, but others, it really has had an impact. So I think we should look at it that way if we decide on taking action.
Yeah, and I think it creates morale issues if we leave a little small select group out of that. I appreciate Shannon and the points on the added workload to the teachers. My wife's a first grade teacher, and I've seen firsthand the increased workload. It's been significant, and then with the quarantines and everything else, it's quite a burden that has been placed on our administrators, our teachers, our staff, even the bus garage. And these guys are the guys that are left out, but the cleaning practices and the things that have been pushed through there are adding extra time to the workload. So I agree, not necessarily calling it a bonus, but I think it needs to go all the way across the board.
So could we get some numbers next time on, maybe just see where that would come from and what?
Yeah, again, I
I
will
guess
look
you gave us
into,
the-
on the funding side of that, whether
Okay.
this ESSER money can be used as well for some of that. So
Perfect.
if that's the case, then we'll have funding there.
I'm also on board with Dale's mention and Ben. I get that. I get the fact that I got out in the nick of time.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thank you, Todd. Next. Nice short one here. Just kidding. Not sure what you've got planned, but let's talk about bonding and significant capital needs discussion.
Now, this is just honestly a brief type thing, and Hunter's here to be able to answer any questions. With 3 new board members, we wanted to revisit the discussion in regards to capital facilities and the fact that the board postponed putting out a bond initiative for last year because of COVID and the concerns about the economy and uncertainty there. We do still have some of those needs though, and so we just kind of wanted to give a brief outline of what those needs are. And I know some of you have been in the schools and you've been talking to people about some of their capital needs. A couple of you have gone and toured East Elementary, which was one of the top things on our list, replacement school there because of the age of the current building, and then just the remodeling and expansion a little bit of the 2 middle schools, Cedar Middle and Canyon View Middle. We're still going to need those expansions. We are down a little this year in number of students in our school buildings because so many have gone online. And it's hard to know what exactly is going to happen next fall, if those students all come back into the classrooms or not. But I think a lot of those projects that we were going to do at the 2 middle schools were, one, to accommodate growth and the fact that our classrooms and our buildings were too crowded, but also to provide a little more space for certain areas, the music areas, and then some of the science rooms and that type of thing as well. So, and then safety and security is our other. If we are going to address those issues this year through a bond initiative, we need to get started on that in our next couple of meetings so that we make sure that that information gets communicated out to the public, that they know exactly where the money's going and for what purposes, that we justify the need, that we get members of the public on board with that and they understand the whole reason behind it. If you have any questions specific to some of the projects, Hunter can answer those. Timeline-wise, really, there's a lot of planning that goes into it early on. You would need to pass a resolution calling for a bond election prior to August 19th. So we need to get rolling on some of this if that's the desire of the board.
Talk a little about the debt service we have and what amount of bond we can incur and maintain the same debt service.
Okay, so we paid off 2 of our bonds with our last bond payments, and our debt service decreased drastically. And the way that the property taxes work is, for debt service anyway, is that the tax rates are established based on our debt payments for that year that are coming up. So what happens typically if when you pay off a bond, then that rate decreases pretty sharply. What other districts are finding is if they allow those rates to decrease like that and they maintain at those low rates for a period of time, then it's really hard to get a bond passed, because all of a sudden it looks like you're increasing their tax rates tremendously, right? And so we like to kind of smooth out those rates and keep them fairly equal when we have the need. Now, if we didn't have any needs, obviously it's fine. We drop it, we let it go, and we don't worry about it, type of a thing. But when you have a need like we have, we don't want to put it off any longer for fear that then the public's appetite for increased tax rates is not there. So we are able to, and Dale, I don't know if I know the exact numbers, Hunter Matt can help me again, but I think we figured with was it a $50 or $60 million bond, those tax rates would remain about the same as they are currently. And again, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me on that, Dale, I apologize.
Well, that's okay, but we can argue both ways. We can say it's not a tax increase because it didn't increase the levy. But we can argue on the other side, it is a tax increase.
It is a tax.
Because if we didn't have a bond, it wouldn't be there, so.
Exactly.
So you can argue whatever point you want to take on it.
Yep.
But the fact is, we still need some improvements. We still need some bond money.
Right.
And if we maintain the same mill levy, that's a lot more palatable to taxpayers than if we're trying to really exceed that existing tax rate.
Yeah.
On some of the projects you've talked about, I know one of the concerns is with Parowan and the multi-use type of a building over there. We don't have a lunchroom for our high school students. They're going to elementary school to eat lunch. We don't have a real great place to be able to do physical education for the elementary school students, and so there is a definite need for some type of a multi-use space. Is that included in this conversation?
It hasn't been, yes and no. It hasn't been included on this first initiative. The reason being is when the school district went out in 2018 with the bond initiative that did not pass, the vast majority of feedback that we got from the public was too much.
Yeah.
You just asked for too many things. Not that there wasn't a need, it was just all at once. And so the feedback that we got was ask for your very highest priorities. And so we've gone back and we've really tried to assess what we deem as of right now in a first proposed bond issuance, which we would anticipate would be covered by a 3 to 4 year period, as what we have here. The second bond issuance, which would likely come, given if the community were to approve a bond initiative here within the next year, we would probably be 3 years down the road from that point. That second bond initiative would include a multi-use area for Parowan that would include kind of like a field house style. So there would be able to be joint use between the high school, the elementary school, an additional gymnasium that could be used by the community. As you know, you get over in a community like Parowan that's pretty basketball oriented. With the use of those 2 gyms and kind of a half gym that's in the current elementary school, they get used up pretty quick. And so this would allow for some community use as well as first use by the school district, but then also be able to have some community use by for those facilities, so.
And I'd recommend other board members get over to understand how lunch works at the high school and elementary school and those challenges. We're a small school over there, but you would be flabbergasted at the process that they have to run through to do that. It may increase that need up on the list a little bit. Then the other question that I have, I know there's quite an appetite from the state legislature, and Dale will understand this as well, for DFCM to manage K through 12 projects where they have not in the past.
Right.
There's a high likelihood of that passing in this legislative session, which would change a little bit the way we go through things, the energy code that's associated with that, the way the building's built, all of those types of things. And so I think as we go through the process, we'll have to understand the impact that's going to have on our overall budget. And it's a little bit of a challenge to give, to the community, because it is going to increase our initial square footage cost of that building and decrease our cost over time of the building, because they'll be more energy efficient. They'll, have some of those benefits as well. But as we're rolling through this and we bond, I don't want to bond for a building and be too short-sighted and then have this come into place, and DFCM, acronym, Department of Facilities and Construction Management, to have them come in to, change the process that our buildings run through and see a slight increase in the square footage costs and not be able to get the building that we're needing or the additions.
And it's interesting, man, I'm glad you bring that up, because it's kind of there's differing opinions on that. I mean, amongst architects, amongst general contractors that build a lot of large commercial buildings that go with the LEED programs and that years down the road are arguing that the savings are not there. And we hope, I think it would be the school district's hope and the community's hope, and Ben, you've got great experience with dealing with the FCN, where we've always had the luxury of being able to design build on our own. But the majority of people that I visit with amongst entities that deal with the FCM, there is that increased cost, and that's been one of the arguments and one of the reasons that DFCM, or the legislature, has kept DFCM out of managing school construction for public education, is because there's a significant increased cost to the public on general obligation bonds.
You can't even manage the crap they have now.
Amen.
Involved in the county.
Amen.
But I think there is quite an appetite. I think it has a high likelihood.
Well, you're right. It's can I use the word sexy? Is that bad? It's sexy because everybody wants to look at energy efficiency and green buildings. I will argue on behalf of our district, our teachers, our staffs, our custodians, our maintenance departments, the energy program that we run in-house has been largely effective at reducing our costs, our operating costs, to the tune of about 23 to 24% of prior operating costs once we implemented our energy program. Now again, those are lots of debates that are going to continue to happen.
I wonder if we had to go to a LEED program for a new construction, we'd be up another 25%. That's a stupid program.
Well, and with the state, it won't be a LEED program. It'll be the state energy code that they've adopted to push.
Yeah, they've adopted their own code, which is...
People are still deeply in love with, they came out of Washington DC with a bunch of smart think tanks.
Yes.
That couldn't work from the private industry.
And the state's program, it mirrors a lot of LEED. There obviously some differing stuff, but yeah, I mean, again, it would be my hope and that we would avoid DFCM having.
But if it's passed by the legislators, it forces our hand, and I just think we need to be aware of that as a board going into this, because I don't want to leave you shortchanged that all of a sudden we've gone through with a bond and now we can't produce.
Short $5 or $10 million.
Exactly,
to make
those items.
Exactly.
So I think it'll be important for us as we initiate this process and we roll through this process that we're really keeping a close eye on what the legislature does.
And so let me speak just a little bit of that, Ben. Thanks for bringing that up, because in our cost estimates for the bond initiative that we have been looking at in terms of a new East Elementary due to I mean, it is 70 years old. The national average is 50 years for a school building. We're pushing 70 at East Elementary. A new elementary at the east, and the expansions for the performing arts areas and classrooms at both Cedar Middle School and Canview Middle School. Those have been our high priorities. I would also ask, we haven't got this in these numbers yet, and we'll continue to update those. We've spent a lot of time over the last few months at Cedar High School in the science wing. Now, if any of you guys have been in the science wing, the chemistry lab in particular at Cedar High School over the last little while, it was the same when that building was opened. And so we've been looking largely at some remodeling in that area. We initially were looking at using some capital funding to go in and do some facelifts in those areas, in those science areas. The more we've got into it, we're seeing the insufficient size of the classrooms in comparison to the current enrollment for chemistry, biology, all of those different science programs. It has a very large science storage area to where we're assessing that right now to see what can we do to remodel that wing, use up some of that space that's just being wasted in order to get more space for actual classroom settings versus large storage areas. So that would be an area that I don't think we would be able to cover completely out of it. If we did use the capital budget to do that, we would largely exhaust the capital budget, that needs to go towards all of our buildings versus one building in particular. And so that would be a fourth item that I would strongly suggest we look at to put on the nearest bond initiative that we're discussing.
Well, if we add a little bit of money to the bond just to account for possibly the FCM coming in, and then hope that the FCM doesn't come in, we'll have enough money to build a multi-purpose
There you
building.
go. There you go. This is the direction I was going, and I kind of sidetracked myself. In the numbers that we put together based on those three, the initial priority projects were the 2 additions to the middle schools and East Elementary. We had put an additional 3% contingency in there. Now, whether or not that would be enough to cover the increased costs that DFCM would require, I'd have to do some analysis, and Ben, I'd welcome your input on that where you've got a vast knowledge of DFCM. We've got some money in there that would help absorb some of that. Whether it would be enough, that's where we'd have to reassess.
Well, and let's watch as it goes through the legislative cycle. If it looks like it's going to go that direction, I'll sit down and be happy to go through it.
That'd be great.
And we should, given our timeline, we have to have it solid by July or August, but we should know by then, right? Is that right?
Yeah, it'll be in this legislative session if it is going to roll
So
through.
we should have a good idea, but that's great
Yep.
for our planning. So it sounds like this is something that we would like to pursue, at least bring back more information. And
Yeah, so Hunter has been visiting with principals and out in the schools, that type of thing, trying to come up with updates to our 10-year capital facilities plan. We should have that ready for your February work meeting, where we can go through some of those details, and we can then assign priorities to those projects and determine how big the bond would need to be.
Shannon, we ought to be making a push through the State School Board Association to levy and lobby against this stupid.
Yes, I was just gonna say that, so that starts today.
Mhm.
The session started today. I know I will be involved in meetings every Thursday and Friday for the next month. Would welcome anytime any of you want to be a part of those conversations. They're all going to be virtual this year, that you do, and that you lend your expertise, and that you're contacting our legislators so that they know where our feelings and thoughts land. So great.
Yeah, I think the business administrators will be in on that too. There was a lot of discussion about that in our last meeting.
So we can't propose a vote right now, but I think we ought to really look at that immediately, and if Ben's got this kind of background, it'd be a really good resource for giving some input on that. It just, looking at the hardship it puts on the district to get what you need in place, and you already came off the one failure of the $93 million bond, which I voted against too. But making it reasonable, just keeping it in that range, so I think that's great that you got some of that. So.
16 million?
Well, the last time we visited this probably about a year ago, right before COVID hit, we had a couple different options. The highest of those options, let me get through my papers here. I believe the highest of those options was around 55 to 60. Now that was without a few other items that we had discussed that we needed to maybe push in there, but I think that's the realm that we were looking in, was the 55 to 60 range, coming off of the 92 that was proposed the first time, so in 2018. So cost of construction in terms of the commercial world it's been fairly, I don't want to say out of control, it's been fairly consistent in the last few months. What most of the school districts along the state are seeing is right around $250 a square foot. What we have billed around is $275 a square foot, which gives us a little bit of that padding. As the markets continually, I mean, it took off drastically, which we've had the discussion multiple times. It took off and didn't look like it was ever going to come back down, and it's leveled a little bit. There's still volatility in the market, more around lumber costs, which for our buildings, you don't typically see a lot of lumber in a commercial school setting, but it's not out of the question either. If we really get down to the nuts and bolts and say, hey, we've got to limit some cost here, and we can't afford a cast tilt building, you know, I mean, every option's on the table to try and limit the expense to our taxpayer, but at the same time be able to put a quality project that's going to last to be a 50-year building together. So
It seems like we need to work backwards on what we can afford based on the existing mill levy and make the project fit what we can afford, so we don't have a champagne beer budget.
Yeah, Paul.
Thank you. So I've lived with having done mill work for over 30 years.
Yeah. Thanks, Rick.
You gotta stick that right.
Okay.
Yeah, eat it.
And turn it on too. Is it green?
Is that good? Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go.
So, having done mill work in these projects for over 30 years, I've lived the lead deal. I agree 100% with Dale and Ben and Hunter. It's a total waste of money. For my cabinetry, between a lead cabinet and not, there's not a lick of difference. Because what it is, it's a chain of custody issue. They make us, when the tree's cut down to when I install the cabinet, I have to have a chain of custody of everything that touches that board. And it increases, it probably doubles my material costs, and it's a total waste of money. We need to, Ben, I'd appreciate if you let me know what this bill number is gonna be with the DFC.
Yeah.
We need to fight that really hard.
And just to be clear, they don't use lead as the standard. So DSM does not use lead. It's a state energy code that they've adopted because of those challenges. It'll evaluate how close the school is to a bus stop. And so in Parowan, our lunchroom, we'd get no leads points because of that. So yeah, just to be clear, it does not use lead as the basis of design. It does use the state energy
and
code.
and they have a name for it. It just escapes me at the moment because we've never had to, we've been able to build and get all of our certifications and all of our plan review checks done in compliance with all of the IBC codes, to where we've just always been able to avoid that extra level of, let's call it what it is, red tape.
So it's not as extreme as it sounds initially coming into this, like it's going to be a major change, but it will maybe have a 3% cost increase on costs going through there. And I don't know whether the legislators are going to push it through or not. They look at it as they own the buildings and they want their buildings to meet a certain standard. And so if there's state dollars going into it, they'll use DFCM. Right. So I don't know what it's going to do. I just know there's an appetite for
Having been involved in the construction of a lot of the buildings in our district, I can just say that the quality of construction and the process that's been done has been excellent. Having worked in the trades for
absolutely. And we become the victim of everybody else that's out there. So you look at our district, I agree, does a fantastic job. I've dealt with Hunter in the past, does a fantastic job with things here. You get some other school districts that struggle, and the state corrects it as a whole.
Yeah, they want to put the umbrella on everybody.
Yeah, we become a casualty.
Yeah. I know, Ben, I feel like I'm throwing darts at you by bad-mouthing DFCM when you work with them all the time.
No, you're good. You're good. No worries.
Ben and Hatcher, can we maybe put together some talking points so all of us know what our responses should be and the direction in addressing that legislation?
Absolutely. I'll set up a meeting with you, Hunter, and we can kind of talk through this. And I'll have some additional conversations with some of the guys I know at the SCM to see what they're hearing on their side of things. And if they do open it up to DFCM and they go through a memorandum of understanding, an MOU process, that basically gives you the authority and jurisdiction to run it through your process. So it wouldn't change the way you're doing things. It would just, so there's some caveats of how this will turn out.
There's extra layers that it adds on top.
The bottom line is, I want to make sure as we're going through a bond process from the board that we are setting you guys up for success versus setting you up for failure when something changes through there.
Well, and that was, I mean, that's a great point, and that was one of our, when we got all the, call it what it was, negative feedback from the prior initiative, is we were seeing these costs just go through the roof, and we were trying to, you're throwing a dart at the timeline saying this is about when we're getting, and if you judge the current inflation rate over the last 6 months or last year, this is where we're going to be. And so, there was obviously some additional money in there that was protection for the district that if it continues to climb like that, we're still taken care of to meet those needs exactly like
Yeah, and as we present this to the community to help them to understand what those dollars are for, that may be a benefit to us getting this passed. So, sorry, that's too much discussion.
Madam Chair, can I ask one more question? So the wing on that East Elementary that was added not that long ago, I mean, when you talk about replacing that school, is that going to be salvaged or not?
So Dell and I spent a considerable amount of time last year assessing that exact question. So that was built in 2008 at the cost of like $1 million on the nose when we built that. So it's 12 years old, and we looked at how many different scenarios, Dale, where we tried to bring in another addition to this side and pilfer off of it. At the end of the day, when we ran our cost assessments through our architects, through multiple general contractors, it was basically sixes to try and keep it or to build, to take it down and construct a full building. So I think we were within $1 million of each other. So,
sorry,
no, it's a great question.
Thank you. Yeah,
We knew that was going to be a concern from the get-go when we started down that route with the East Elementary. Is we did just put $1 million into this building 12 years ago. How do we justify taking it down? And again, all the cost analysis that we ran, we put into.
So it's still a conversation though.
I agree. I think it's still a conversation. I think when you get down to the end of the day, the board will have to make that decision and how wide a gap do we need to see before we say it's worth it to construct a whole new facility that's going to get us 50 to 70 years versus try and salvage 5 classrooms. So, are there any other capital projects, bond initiative items that I can answer any questions that you have at this point? So,
I've had conversation about the bus garage and the parking and the fence and all that. It's an extremely high priority of mine. So I'll pursue that again with you.
okay. Yep.
I'm concerned about security out there and the possibility of
The neighbors out there are rough, I know.
bomb.
So, yeah, we've looked at a couple options. Todd and I have had some discussions on a few different things that we can pursue that we'll bring to the board in that February meeting, in that February working meeting.
Todd, do you have anything to add
No.
on that?
That's everything.
Can you give us, this is the end of my 3rd year on the board, and I feel like I've been through the process twice already. We didn't complete it last year, we got started, but I've been impressed with the past. I've appreciated the process that we've gone through. I've always received really good information. I don't have all the experience that some of these other gentlemen do, and so what can we expect moving forward? Sometimes we have invited Jonathan Ward from Science Bank down to talk through some of the finances and the bond details with us. I find that to be very helpful. What should the process look like going from here?
Well, and he's ready to come down anytime the board would like him to come and do a bonding, one-on-one type of a training with the board so that they understand exactly how the bonding process works. And I would highly recommend that we do have him come down. He also understands the structure of our current bonds and what the effects of new bonds would be on tax rates and those types of things moving forward. So I'd recommend that fairly soon. Hunter puts together the capital facilities or updates, capital facilities plan. We talk about priorities, where those priorities are, what projects we want to focus on. We start to get details on those or update the details on those if they're projects that we've discussed in the past, and start taking that out to the public and talking to community leaders and others who can help, I guess, during that process, make sure that everybody understands why we need them, the facilities that we need, and what effect it's really going to have on their tax dollars.
Would you recommend a conversation about that 10-year capital plan first and then maybe Jonathan down the next time, or would you reverse that?
It really doesn't hurt to have Jonathan come
Okay.
and go through some of that, I think.
So we see the numbers first and the impact and...
Yeah, well, so we should have that ready by the February work meeting.
Oh,
If you wanted to have
fantastic.
Jonathan come that same meeting, we could do
We could do it
that.
all. Okay.
Or, yeah, I wouldn't wait till March for him. I'd probably
Okay.
want rather
Sooner rather
that
than later.
happen in
I think one of
February.
the good parts about that is as we present the 10-year plan to you, there are other items in there that the board may say, you know what, we feel that's a higher priority than this, and perhaps some additional items get put into a bond initiative that otherwise we were looking at saying, well, maybe perhaps we can cover that out of capital, or maybe it's not as high a priority. So he would, at least at that point, as we continue to add to or raise the final dollar amount of those proposed bond initiatives, he'd be able to at least give you some information on what the tax implication would be based on the dollar amounts. So
Great. That sounds terrific. Anything else on that? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Hunter.
You bet.
Appreciate it. All right, we have one final item tonight, and this is something we talked about, just an opportunity to discuss our priorities. Why don't we do this? I kind of thought about the best way to discuss this. Why don't we just start with Jeff? Let's just get a list. I kind of started to put one together based on things you've communicated to us already, but we'll just kind of go down the row, and some of these things we've actually already got a start on, so that's going to give us an idea of where we're going to start. But Jeff, go ahead.
You wanted a detail on this, or you just want
You know
what I
what?
see as priorities?
Why don't you go ahead and give us, when it says, given the hour, a little bit of detail would be great so we understand what it is we're hoping to accomplish, but we'll keep it brief. Does that sound fair?
That would be great.
Awesome, go for it.
Everybody knows I'm a firm believer in teaching time.
Yes.
Not touching
Yeah.
that.
Oh, microphone, yes.
Very good.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to put on there, late start Wednesdays,
Got it.
XLTs, and flex. Continue.
Okay.
Standard-based grading. The Redmond symbol. We've talked some well already about social emotional learning. Don't know if there'll be further conversation on that. There probably will, but I guess there should be.
Sure.
Okay? And building needs, we talked with Hunter tonight, so I imagine that will continue no matter whether I put it on there or not.
Sure. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Jeff. Ben?
Yes, building needs, absolutely, and I talked a little bit about what Parowan's up against over there. But one of the concepts that I would really like to have as a priority for the board, in my profession, and Dale's very well aware of this, at the university we have quite a bit of changeover when we have a new president come in or a new provost come in, and it changes things all the time, and you're scrambling, and it takes them a moment to understand why you do the things the way you do them. And I've had personal experiences where they've come in and changed and then gone back later and changed back to the way it was because they get educated. As a board, I think it's a great opportunity for us to get educated. So a listening tour really gives us the opportunity to hear from the teachers, to be able to hear from administrators why they do the things they do. So while we come in and we may think, hey, I would do that differently, once we begin to understand how they go through the process or why they do what they do, we have a paradigm shift. We change our minds a little bit. We begin to understand. And, I'm a firm believer that I love our cars that we have today. Henry Ford, when he came in and started to build, they progressed upon that style all the way through and have improved until we have what we have today, and it'll continue to improve. You don't throw it out and start with a whole new thing. What's going right, what's going wrong, and so it's the priority to really set the focus on that process of giving the opportunity for our teachers, our administrators, our staff to say, hey, this is why we do things that way. Reaching out to the community as they come in and they say, hey, we've got concerns with this, to understand why we do what we do, to help educate. And this is, I guess, a little bit selfish as a new board member. I understand I got a lot of learning to do as we go through this process, to be able to understand why you do the things that you do. But I want to do our best to minimize unintended consequences of our policy decisions and, our decisions that we have. Late Start Wednesday, that's one thing to be able to discuss. And we could run through and say, well, this is what it does to Cedar High School and to Canyon View, but what impact does it have on Parowan? Parowan doesn't have the resources available to them to do a lot of the things that are happening at Cedar High School, Cedar, and at Canyon View. So if we make changes really quick, then we have those unintended consequences that roll through there. And so it's a priority to make that listening a part of our process, that we really work with the community, we work with our teachers, our administrators, our district, to see what are the unintended consequences that I can't see from my perspective going into this, that it would have as an impact as it rolls through. So.
Awesome, thank you, Ben. Dave,
Okay.
we've got a couple of years already, but
Yeah, some of them
remind
might
us.
tick off here already.
You're doing great.
We talked about the need to, I won't even mention them because we already talked about them. Some of the community engagement things with board meetings. One of the things that I would really like to see us do right away is to look, and I think you must have talked to Jeanette already about getting some information together on the federal, the state HR laws, and our current policies on HR issues, which I have studied through the ones I could find in the current policies that we have. But I noticed a few things that looked like weak spots in there to me. From my perspective, I would like to really look at those. I want to make sure that, as I mentioned earlier, that we have our teachers that are not afraid to express concerns, issues with anything, policies, curriculum, any other things. The grievance process is kind of a separate thing to me than that. The grievance process looks like more personal issues within a school. When it's a countywide thing, or a district-wide thing, I'd like to look at that a lot closer so that they can make observations, comments without fear.
So are you talking about just like feedback on, just like, here's how this is going, or this is what I think of this classroom, or this is what
I will just tell you, I have heard this, because I have been on a listening tour for quite a few months too, with teachers. And I have heard this repeatedly over and over again. And it's not just the Iron County School District issue, it's an education issue. And a comment kind of sums it up from one teacher. We just get the feeling that we should shut up and be glad we have a job. And I've heard that multiple times, an expression like that. And so I've had teachers talk to me and say, if they knew I was talking to you, I would be in big, big trouble. So little things, cultural things like that. I'd like to see that in. I would like to see us come up with things that, with some policies that give teachers the ability to speak and express concerns without fear of any kind of retribution or retaliation employment-wise, but still keep it within a very civil discourse as well. So I don't know how we'll look at that exactly, but I think starting with Jeanette providing the HR law. I know for our business, we are very careful with HR law, and I think the district policies may even go a little beyond HR law to do with education environments. I'm not sure, but I'd really like to look at that and just get a really good feel for it, and maybe look at those policies again so our teachers don't feel that kind of discomfort, but there's a culture of being able to suggest, to observe, to speak, to see things that they might see as improvements or problems in the areas that they're working. So that's the one I'd like to see that, and I think we talked about maybe having that on the agenda next week for you to get that together for us.
I don't know if that was next week or next work session.
Next work
study
session, maybe, whichever.
But
Yeah,
we'll talk and see what,
yeah, that's
it might
fine.
be a good study session.
I share my thoughts with the standard-based grading. I want to understand that really well. I hear a lot from parents, teachers, and students that are really struggling with that. I've heard a few teachers that like it. So I've kind of seen both sides of that one. Standards-based versus merit-based grading, which would be our standard or our merit-based grading that we've had for years. So I'd like to learn more about that. I'd like to put that on the agenda. Maybe even do on some of these, like that one's going to be a pretty big issue to discuss. I think to really get an understanding from all sides, and probably want to do some public. What did you call them? Public hearings on some of these. I think a public hearing on that one would be very appropriate. I share my sentiments with the school name and symbol issues. The curriculum selection process and oversight, like we talked earlier, I'd like to see that. I would specifically I would like to see this in our next meeting, a deeper discussion on SEL, but I think that's also one that we need a public hearing on, so that there's a really, really good disclosure of everything. Again, just to build understanding, education, and trust on all sides. I would like to see an item on our action agenda next week for that as well, to see what we want to do on this specific, the Suite 360 situation, with the concerns that have been expressed there, and also have a little time on that to have a little more presentation on that from a citizen standpoint. So unity versus diversity, big issues right now with racism, racial equity, racial justice, social justice, all of these things. I've been exposed through some of the state school board members that I've become more familiar with with a unity approach, which I really like. I've had a little time to participate in a little of that and speak with some people that do this, versus the diversity. It's bringing us together instead of pointing out our differences, to deal with social justice, critical race theory, unity training, those kind of things. So I would like to have that one on somewhere probably in February or March, to have a discussion about that. And again, this may rise to the level of a public hearing on this one too, because that's a hot button issue right now, big time, and it's become quite divisive actually in our country and even here. I would like to talk a little bit at some point about the teacher opening institutes that you guys have in the summer in preparation for the school year. Learn a little bit about where the subject matter comes from, and as we develop our expectations as a board, maybe reviewing what plans are in that arena, what subjects will be covered, and just kind of see how it fits with our vision of things as we go through and make updates to all those things. So that would be what I'd like to see. But that might need to be something that we look at a little bit quicker, because you'll be in the planning stages of that already, I'm sure, to put that together. So maybe a little discussion on that next work meeting might be a good one, just to see how that's coming and what the processes are that you guys use to put that together. The idea of technology in the classroom. One of the things that I have noticed just by observation and actually some expression of concern by a number of teachers is the heavy use of technology in the classroom. A lot of screen time. The kids are still in front of screens a lot in the classroom, rather than putting that stuff away for a little while. I know that there's reasons that that's there for learning to use technology. I see value in just looking at that issue and kind of seeing how that balances, and if there should be some standards that we kind of adopt as a board as to how much technology really should be used and how much face-to-face teaching maybe should be incorporated or re-looked at, revisited as methods for teaching. Have had quite a few conversations with teachers on that. I'd really like to look at, and this will be a longer term one, at simplification in general. We all are very familiar, most of us here are very familiar with one organization that has really turned from very complex things to very much simplifying things in the lives of its members, and turning a lot more back toward the family as the basic unit and the basic place where everything should originate from. I think we really should take a hard look at that. Orchards need to be kept in good shape in order to make big apples. And I think we should just really make sure that what we're doing, if there's areas that we feel like could be simplified, to really hone in on the basic roles of the school and the roles of the family. Examine all of our programs and determine what are the necessities. One reason I'd like to look at this too, I talked with Todd about this a couple of weeks ago, and I talked with Shannon about this in our visit too, is possibly, not possibly, developing some protocols for dealing with funding cuts that could happen in the future. Like if we hit certain benchmarks, this is what we have to do. These are the adjustments we have to make in our offerings or whatever it might be. And just start for a long-term security kind of a look at the way that the district would operate in hard times, which I believe the scriptures, quite frankly, and I believe we're going to hit some really hard times someday. So I can speak about that because I'm an elected official. So I think that we should prepare for times that could become very difficult financially, and what we would do, where we, what would be the breaking points to move to certain changes in the way that we do our things in our schools. So I will leave that very general at this point in time. One thing that I'm really interested in looking at, and this can be a longer term thing down the road, 3, 4, 5 months, I would really like to look at some alternatives in particularly in our elementary school setting. I have discovered something that's just been a gem to me, and I'm going to throw it out. During the election, one of the opponents in the school board race said that some of us wanted to move education back 10 years or 20, and I responded with maybe 50, 60, 70 might be good. And now that I've discovered some other things, maybe 150 would be good in some respects too. Not saying that we need to go all back to this, but if any of you have ever read the McGuffey Readers, they are amazing. And I really think that there's some value in looking back and seeing the value of some of our prior generations and the way that reading was taught, values were taught, this social emotional concept, honestly, is so well taught in that, it's just amazing. I'd actually like to share some of those at each of our board meetings just as a look back, just to give us perspective on what happened in the past, just briefly, maybe at the beginning of meetings. But looking to see if there's ways that we can address some of the people in our community who don't want to attend public schools because of either programs, initiatives, ideologies that they see as being a problem. I've talked with some state school board members about this, and when I mentioned to them, I kind of gave them a little vision of just some concepts that have been thinking about. They were actually really, they were like, wow, that would be an amazing thing to try and see how things go. And I'll just give you one little, for instance, in the fourth reader of the McGuffey readers, it's the fourth grade reader, basically. I have to get my dictionary out to find some of the words in those lessons and stories that they have there. You get into the sixth reader, it's difficult to understand. But these kids in the 1800s were doing that. So I think we have room to look back, see where we are, kind of compare ourselves a little bit with ages past and see what's there. Anyway, I'm going to call it, you can write this down, an old school concept that perhaps we could do a school, an elementary school that had kind of an old school feel concept to it, using some curriculums from the past, needing to match those to state standards, obviously, as well as we could, but possibly even seeking some exemptions on that. And those state school board members, there's 3 of them actually, I've talked to them about it, and they are like, we should try that. And then see how the academics go, see how the SEL type feelings come from some of those old texts and the values that are taught that are very, very valuable. I come away from those, it's my nightly reading before I go to bed, and it's just like, I go to bed feeling like $1 million because of the things that I've read in those. So I think it's just something I'd like to see us look back to a little bit and see if there's something creative we could do that would bring some, even the homeschool community back into the system, possibly with those kind of things, because I know that's a lot of their concern, or others. We have, and I've not really talked with any of these folks yet, but our folks that came up from Colorado City and other areas are generally not participating in the public schools too much, I don't think, are they? Maybe some?
Yeah, we have some that are.
We've seen an increase in our online school, students just recently, and then some of our community schools are gaining the trust a little bit of those families. So not a ton, but more than in the past.
Yeah, so I think it'd be interesting to approach that. These kids are children of God just like anybody else, and if they are comfortable in a setting where they don't feel like their values are being compromised and things that even, I mean, I tell you, if you were to open an elementary school with that kind of concept, it would fill in a couple of days, even from just the general public and families out there. So it's an idea I want to explore.
Okay.
So.
Just a comment on that, Dave. Every once in a while I would have driver ed kids from that community come and take the class. And towards the end of my career, we actually held a complete class from that group after school. They're the ones I think requested it. This was driver ed, okay? They met separately at Cedar High. I think Mr. Scheck-Snyder taught that class, but you got a point there.
Anyway, it wouldn't just be for that community alone either. A lot of people are extremely interested in that kind of a concept that I have just mentioned, and they're just like, whoa, if that could really happen. Anyway, those are my topics. Some of them timeline-wise, I think I mentioned that as I went through, didn't I? I would like to see these published on our board calendar, our board meeting calendar, well ahead of time. Monica is awesome. I can't tell you, Monica, how good you are about getting everything up online. All our pictures were there already, and if I'd have known you were going to put them there, I found a high school picture from my senior days. I would have sent that to you instead.
I didn't do that.
You didn't?
No.
Oh, well, I might have to find out who did and send a new picture. I'm just teasing. Anyway, what I'd like to, and we may not have time to do this today, maybe this will be for another meeting, but I think we should schedule some of these in specific months that we're going to kind of go after them. One that I really would like to see put on a calendar, this is not my top priority, but it is a big concern to me. But we've got, of course, the Redmond, or the Cedar High, the Redmond name and symbol. I would like to see that put in the April work and action meeting to do that. Just revisit that. I know Jeff feels the same. We chatted a little bit about that. I would like to see that done by the April meetings, and just, let's go look at that. Let's see where we go with that. And there's gonna be a lot of other things. I think maybe another meeting might be better to kind of schedule some of these, but that one's a little more time sensitive, I think, if something's gonna change there, so. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Dave, I appreciate that, and we'll look at all of that. Dale, I know you mentioned facilities.
My greatest priority is adjourn this damn meeting.
You might get tired, isn't it?
I'm right there with you.
30 seconds. Jeff, did you mention Common Core?
I did not bring that
Okay.
up.
I will then. 30 seconds. I'd like to see the camera system that we have throughout schools made available to our local police people. They need access to those cameras. They have to respond. I've already mentioned the bus garage, the security of the buses and the parking, the lighting, the whole shot out there. We've talked about board pictures, and Monica will be preparing a new calendar that reflects the 2 meetings per month. So with that, Madam President, I'd suggest you adjourn the meeting.
I absolutely will. I just need to throw out there one last, a lot of you mentioned my priorities. I'm especially on board with the listening tour. I maybe perhaps in answer to that, the board has traditionally visited a school each month. That's not something we've discussed yet and we've changed our meeting schedule. We used to do, 10:30, 11, we visited school, then we had work session, then we had, or study session, then regular session. We have usually a school assigned to report once a month. Do we have someone scheduled for next week?
3 peaks.
It's 3 peaks. And so, according to our tradition, we would do a visit of 3 peaks the day of the regular meeting. So is that something that the board, I strongly recommend, I think this is a great idea that can fit in with this, it takes 2 years to get through all of the schools. But I think it's a great thing. I think it allows us to see things in action and to meet with students, meet with administrators, and see some teachers at work. So my question, I guess, would be, is this something that would be better in the morning, better in the afternoon? For me, it's better in the afternoon schedule-wise with work, but I can accommodate whatever we need to do. In the morning at an elementary school, you said we're going to see more the language program. In the afternoon, we'll see more the math and science. Is that a rough assessment?
Science, social studies, arts, special stuff.
Okay. If we lean towards an afternoon time, what would the recommendation be? Or is it?
Well, part of the visit is look at the facilities, number one, including the classroom and the equipment in the different science rooms. It's good to have students there, but for in the afternoon, we won't see many students, but we can assess
But if we did something like,
facilities and,
if we did like 2 o'clock or?
Lunch is usually over by 12:45, 1 o'clock. Is that true? So if we go at 1.
We went at
Secondary
1.
schools are out at 2:30.
So 1 o'clock would be a better, if we planned, would 1 o'clock in general be a decent time for school tours? Let's try
It'd
it.
be all right. I've already visited South and Cedar High
Sure.
School, and I've got Iron Springs this Thursday.
Sure,
I'm
awesome.
spending most of the day at those schools
Okay,
and sitting in classrooms.
good for you.
And 1 o'clock, you probably, won't see as much, like you say, as whatever, but it doesn't matter to me.
Well, let's try that at 1 o'clock, and so that will be next Tuesday for visiting 3 Peaks. And with that, let's adjourn this meeting.
I second that.
I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
is this where you need more?
No, this is tomorrow night, it'll be on it's on the website.
I don't know how to work it.
So you're laughing, yeah, just put your phone right there.
Yeah, you bet.
No, it's not your last name. Okay, I'll let you know.
How are you?
Are you studying while you're moving?
Yeah, I know. Well, actually, yeah. Congratulations on your new Oh, yeah. That's right. Well, that's what I thought about it's got virtually all of everything.
Is this to get back to you?
I don't know, guys.
If you want to, I'll make it.
Thank you, Mr.
I took more.
They're sitting on my shelf.
To